And we're live. Hi, everyone. I'm Airier, and here we're finishing up the next episode of Star Wars Warhammer 40K, episode 43, The Lords of Catastrophe. Holy shit, I just did that right in one take. This might sound weird coming from a guy who, streams, let's go, professionally. I usually have about 20 minutes of cut-out sections of me saying the name wrong. This feels weird. It's like I'm cheating. Who'd have thought doing it right the first time would only involve... Definitely not cutting out 10 minutes of the stream prior to this, where I definitely forgot I was streaming. Yeah. It's a good thing that didn't happen. More importantly, I want to jump right in. I know that there's a bunch of things coming in because people have said, oh, dear God, you're at this part, and I'm not going to tell you because it's a spoiler. Or something along those lines for a while now. They said that for the first half of this video, and... oh, were they underplaying it. Yeah. So we're going to jump right in, see where this is going. Apparently, Fan has a little intermission he's putting into this one. And honestly, the last few were interesting, so let's see what happens here. I'm sure there's not going to be any spoilers or things he's going to say that would make me question his sanity. He's writing fan fiction and happens to know how to use the English language correctly. I already assume he has none. Every one of us English majors, anyone who does anything with language, we all kind of assume insanity is just a given. And anyone who says otherwise, we get really worried about. Because it's like, oh, they're in denial. Yeah. Moving on. Here we go. And Hobbit in the chat said anti-spoiler enforcement at max. Dude, I'm excited for this one. Now to an interlude.
Hey
Fan
there,
too much
fellow
time.
fans. Fan with too much time here, wishing you all a...
Okay, for some reason I just need to say this. I thought his little workout bike had a freaking Coke right between the wheels for a second. And I'm kind of jealous that he doesn't have that. I'm jealous of the thought of something that doesn't exist. Yeah, he has a regular bottle there, but it's not actually Coke. It'd be a giant, horrible Coke. It's like, hey, how do you practice being really good on a bike? Make sure that it doesn't come out and shake up so much that you get a nut shot by the cap blowing off. This is a great incentive to not ever shake the bike while working out. Is it a good plan? Well, I mean, for anyone watching, yes.
Wishing you all a happy Mother's Day, and hoping you're enjoying this latest episode of Star Wars versus Warhammer 40K.
It's a full year ago. It might actually be Mother's Day.
The Lords of Catastrophe.
Unless I actually forgot the title
This
again.
series has been a lot of fun to make, though it has not been easy. And
I remember his after talk when he brought up his first big, massive, overwhelmingly huge episode. I think it was about 4 hours long. It was the episode where the ship finally started crashing from the sky onto the surface before eventually colliding with an old lady. Not killing her either, because taking a ship to the face didn't kill an old woman in a damaged power suit. Yeah, when you put it like that, it doesn't sound nearly as cool, even if in the moment it was awesome. He mentioned that was his big make or break episode of, am I continuing this, or are we dropping it and saying fuck it and moving on? I'm glad he continued it.
And I can honestly tell you I would not have made it this far if not for the constant moral support given to me by my fellow fans, who quite literally help lift me up as I feel heavy under all the work that needs to get done to make sure that I reach the end and finish.
Just that normal little reminder that you should probably go to the link down below, hit up his channel, subscribe to it. If you can, go to his Patreon, support this man.
However, I should inform you that I also do live another life as my own creator of my own original works and comic books in particular.
My God.
And towards that end, I have been doing quite a lot recently in promoting the steps I need to take in order to finally become an independent creator in the way I've always dreamed that I could be. For you see, fellow fans, it is truly my greatest dream to one day stand as a truly independent content creator, producing novels, comic books, and all the kinds of creative media for people.
Actually, this is just my own question. I checked out his stuff. While I do like some of the stuff he does on comic, I can't bring myself to buy comics because they're always flimsy and I have a bad habit of accidentally destroying them. If you ever had anything hardbound containing all of it or like a novelization, let me know because I would love to just get that.
People to consume, learn from, and escape into. But it's a scary time for creatives, with AI devices like ChatGPT essentially providing free, functional writing.
This is a year ago when the hype around AI was at the highest. Since then, it has come out essentially that ChatGPT is very repetitive. If you see it once, it looks good. If you see it twice, it still looks good. But after the 5th time, you realize you've read it 5 times before with very little variation. And you start to recognize patterns in how they construct sentences that are very codified, very, well, stagnant. They don't have very big repertoires to draw from. Despite having stolen a lot of work, including being able to summarize his entire video, when it comes to creative aspects where it has to make its own, if it's not drawing from something's description, such as the YouTube automated subtitles as an example of what's going on, or the audio profiles for that it can get run through a program to get a good enough understanding, it is not good at generation. Frankly, it's actually so incredibly bad that there's authors who make a point to spam Amazon with their schlock that they just type in there. But it's really easy to see because after a while you read one, it's like, that didn't really make sense. You read 10 and you're still paying too much and you're an idiot for buying 10 before realizing after the first one that it's a complete and utter waste. You could figure it out a lot sooner. A lot of times though, it's just not good. Now I could see it as a tool to just pump out a rough draft because first drafts are supposed to be shit. An AI first draft is fine because it's going to be shit. And by the time you're done, it'll be edited so much, almost no words will remain from the first draft. Unless you're one of those freaks who uses the first draft as the final copy, in which case, one, you are either absolutely incompetent because you don't realize how bad that is, or you're absolutely genius level, and you probably also think you're incompetent even though you're not, and you're probably obsessing it over even though you're not. Or you're Stephen King, but I don't think he would be here to see that. So yeah, I think a lot of the hype around it is overblown, if only because it gets really boring really fast. And if you want to get really bad, boring writing, we already have plenty of people who do that for less than it costs to pay for the electricity of an AI. Yeah. That's actually the consumption right there. People could do this shit cheaper. Not a good reason.
At zero overhead cost, it's begun making the landscape a little more hostile than I had imagined it would be. But as long as there are good fans out there who will not accept a lower quality product and mindless corporate efficiency over stories and narratives.
Obviously, I need to correct one thing he said here. It's not efficiency, it's efficiency. It's usually along the lines of, hey, we have a suicide helpline. Let's replace all of the real human people with AI and see how this goes wrong. I'm sure nothing will happen. It wouldn't cost us anything at all in a lawsuit. It wasn't a suicide helpline that did this. But the fact that I could clarify that an actual location did this, and you can guess how bad it went. Yeah. Also the case in Canada, where it's not American law, but it is Canadian law, that an AI was tricked into giving a 100% discount on a flight for bereavement when that is not the airline's policy. But since the AI in the airline agreed to it, and the person who got it in writing was denied it, but they had it in writing, the court in Canada did say, well, it's your employee. You're talking to them through them. Just because it's an AI doesn't mean you don't have to honor it. So they had to honor it after going through a court case. Random things like that make it funny.
Narratives created by minds not so dissimilar to your own, then I have faith, true faith, that I can eventually reach this dream before Judgment Day rolls around. And that was what I wanted to talk to you about today. A few months ago, I introduced many of you to the first major creative work made between me and my brother. The World of the Red Hunt.
Ooh.
With Red Hunt, issue number 1. At that time,
if he has a hardback copy of this, I would actually pick up a copy.
Here from this channel, me and my brother actually did manage to gather up enough funds to continue and begin production of Red Hunt issue number 2, further expanding upon the world of Red Rune, as well as everything around him, from the various mysteries that are invested within this alternate universe rendition of the United States, to all of the various monsters that inhabit it, and the monster hunters who must risk their lives to place some barrier between them and civilization itself.
Ooh.
But today,
I don't know why, but for some reason the art reminds me of Dark Tower.
To a new world.
I wonder if that's intentional or not.
One of high fantasy, of powerful sorcery, of combating cultures and distinct magic.
Aren't we already listening to his story about that? It's literally Warhammer 4 or Star Wars. I keep saying Star Wars 40K. Wow. Star Wars Warhammer 40K. That's basically exactly what he described right there. It ain't science fiction. There's no way this is science fiction. I know technically it would count as it, but it's such a small patina of science fiction that there's fantasy with more hard scientific rules.
Please allow me
Ooh, and Matthew read it. It's
formally
good.
introduce
Nice.
you to the world of Song and Stone. This project is my pride and joy, and it is my hopes that with help from you, I'll be able to kick it off as not just a single issue, but an entire expansive narrative. To that end, I have made this, the first issue of Song and Stone, free to anyone who would like to view it on my website at thenightlibrary.net. You can find a link to it down below in the description of this video. It has been a distinct privilege to watch as this story that I've had
Honestly,
for
if I
so
can get a
long
hardback
and I've
copy,
been
I just
building
pick it up
up for
myself.
such an amount of my life.
I don't
being
like softback
converted into a
things.
format
They just
that
break
you
so
can
easily.
enjoy. But just as with the Red Hunt, there is much more to this story than can be told in a single issue, and so I am eager to begin really producing and getting to work on issue number 2.
It's been a year. Maybe the other ones
I
aren't.
have launched a
Matthew
Kickstarter
mentioned he
to
read
help
it,
me
and they're both
fund
good, so
and
probably did
gather
come
up
out
the
already.
resources I will need to continue with this awesome work. If successful, if I can continue, then I will come one step closer to finally being able to support myself through my greatest passion.
Also, I need to ask, the art he's using, is the guy being stabbed with bolts or giant stabs? Some of them look like bolts, but some of them don't. Also, Hobbit 1, I don't like fantasy. I watch Star Wars for the story of farm boy rescuing the princess from the evil wizard. Obviously, I mean, what kind of fantasy trope would that be? There's nothing like that in fantasy. Also, someone out there's probably believing everything I just said that you wrote is legitimately not sarcastic. I won't correct them.
Which is, of course, storytelling in various kinds of mediums. It's a dream that both me and my brother are constantly striving towards and constantly looking to achieve. Something that we can only do with your help. Now, thanks to my comments section, I know that there are a fair amount of you who've been asking,
why would you ever actually willingly take advice from the comments section on YouTube? I have seen what kind of hellscape that is. I have read my comments. And if they were not heavily filtered, oh dear God. What you guys see is the safe section. There are so many, admittedly, bots. And then also people who's like, I don't like this because Obi-Wan didn't start kissing Mace Windu when they were on the Death Star together. And it's like, oh my God, this is not the story I signed up for. Okay, one, there are so many things wrong with everything I just said. It should be a joke in its own right. Except we all know at least one person who has said exactly that in the story that has absolutely nothing to do with it. One, Death Star, wrong time period. Mace Windu would already be dead by the time period that came up, so it couldn't happen regardless unless you're really fucking around with everything happening. So you have to make your own story to get to that point, but it's not happening. So if you haven't even got to that point, it's because it's not going to happen. Someone came into a video and left a comment that, oh, I don't like this guy. He just makes jokes about things. And I'm just sitting here going like, yeah, that's kind of the point. Or the times I just harp on English major issues, but yeah, comment section, people. Sometimes the obvious is not obvious. There's a reason common sense is the ultimate superpower that no one actually has.
how you can give me back a little or reward me for all the work I've put into Star Wars versus Warhammer 40K and all the other free series I feature on my channel. If this is a genuine desire that you have, then I have a genuine way that you can help me that would be purely and completely amazing. Please look in the description down below, in the description of this very video, and check out the Kickstarter. If you like, please go ahead.
Ooh, is this still available? Also, I see people in the chat are talking about the Rings of Power and a few other shows along that line. The only thing I'd point out is if an AI did that, ooh, it's already done. Oh no, it's not. Ooh, nice bit. Read for free. Oh, you can see a bit of the art. I didn't notice there, the face breaking. Like the art styles so far. Big monsters. Ooh. Might have to get in on this later. Names. It's so weird seeing his face, even though we're literally just coming from a section seeing his face. Not bad. Have to check that out later.
Go ahead and read the comic.
Yeah.
Judge its worth for yourself.
I mentioned Rings of Power. When it comes to AI, you can hate Rings of Power because the characters are recognizable enough that you can tell that the actions they have taken are stupid, and that you know who is doing that would not do it. An AI-generated option would not be that distinct because they often flip who is doing what. They confuse plot lines. They don't... What we have right now is not true AI. It's an imitation of a predictive model about what you think would come next. So it's not actually following a plot line. It's predicting what word would sound correct in this action. And sometimes it can be brought back to certain things it'll need to bring up again, but it's just weighting values to being brought up in certain orders. The point of making an AI that could pump out something viable, you're essentially writing a novel in the prompts already to the point where you don't need the AI to do it. If there's one thing I've learned from using a lot of Doug's videos, as an example of what a legitimate AI chatbot can do, it's that you don't need to be afraid of them. They do not follow the plot. They put things out and hope you can make sense of it. And when you don't, it's like, what are we looking at? Anything there would make some of the worst anime, worst TV shows, worst movies. It would make the final season of Game of Thrones look like a masterpiece. Because you can tell enough about the characters to know it's wrong, as opposed to what an AI would get up to. And it's like, I don't know if I'm the one having a stroke or if I should just make myself smell toast at this point, because it feels like something is burning, and I don't think it's me at this point. And I'm not sure if it's me or the computer or someone else's computer. And at this point, it all is pain. Yeah.
If you see something that you think is worth investing in, please do. With that support, I have true faith and belief that one day me and my brother will accomplish our dream.
Honestly, I would love to see him do just more professional writing in general. I personally would love more storybook style where it's full-on narrative, but with just massive page size illustrations. If you've read the Dinotopia books, I'm explicitly referring to the first one of that. I love those freaking things. Amazing artist. Also, I just realized I'm still in a bathrobe. I'm in a freaking sauna right now in a bathrobe. If you see a problem with this, well, you're better than me, because I did not until right now.
We'll create various stories and multiple narratives, things that people can enjoy, can escape into, maybe even learn from. It is my pleasure to serve. But to serve, I need a little bit of help. So please, consider reading the comic. Consider looking at the Kickstarter. And if you think it's worth it, consider donating. It means the world to me. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time. And without further ado, I return you to the next episode of Star Wars versus Warhammer 40K, the Lords of Catastrophe. Please enjoy.
Yes. Also, before anyone asks, I stole my wife's mug. I got it from the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. I have no idea if this is blurred in or not, so we'll just take what I can get. It seemed accurate, and the other ones I got of hers I broke already by accident by dropping them. So I just got to make sure not to break this one as well. Yeah. Jedi Master Oppo Rancis. Oh, it's one of the other competent ones. Is it Oppo
Jedi
or
Master Oppo Rancis narrowed his
Rancis?
reptilian eyes, the wind blasting against his face and tossing his tangled beard.
I'm assuming this is Rancis. I'll be honest, there's so much hair here, I would not have realized that was reptilian. You could have just said it was a really old guy for all I know, and it would look about the same.
Outside of his command LAAT gunship, alongside his own vessel, were many, many others. Various converging troop transports of airborne design, which filled the air around them with the warbling buzz of repulsor lift engines. The designated spires, where the enemy had touched down, were just ahead, spikes on the skyline growing rapidly closer, and his keen senses were already tracking the nimble giants of the Imperium as they moved about atop them. Oppo had 4 arms and a serpentine body, his tail wrapped around 3 safety restraints within the gunship to enable him to protrude safely from the cabin, the wind whipping around his body and billowing his robes.
He is in a fight with active participants who are good at aiming, and he's sticking his body outside of the gunship. People keep telling me this is a really competent guy, and I'm just hearing a guy who's like, hey, want to take a pot shot? Maybe they're further enough away that that's not a problem.
His lower right hand rubbed subconsciously against the lightsaber wounds in his chest, the near-mortal injuries only recently healed that he had suffered through at the hands of the fallen Jedi Sora Bulk. His compatriots had assumed him dead,
Plotline that I didn't
and
know.
he very nearly had died, though a potent force trance and subsequent back-to-tank treatments had saved his life. Phantoms of his brush with becoming one with the Force.
So in canon, he probably would have either died to the initial fight and Fan brought him in, or he survived only to be killed during the same time period right now, which would have been Order 66, and he would have died anyways. Yeah. Also, Fan is in the chat, and he literally just got here as I finished the intro. Yeah. Timing.
Hovered close at hand as he shut his outer eyes and opened his inner ones. With a summoning of his training and discipline, the Jedi Master and Tactician initiated a state of
Inner one is the
comprehensive
Force?
battle meditation and connected his mind with subtle skill to the minds of all of his clones. Not only that, but Master Rancisis stretched out his perceptions, casting them like nets over the locations occupied by those mysterious space marines. They appeared to be setting up equipment and deploying tanks, of all things. The spires were no meager distance from the Basilica, and the Jedi Master was left more than a little perplexed as to what it was they intended to do with them.
Are they going to do an artillery bombardment? Depends what kind of tanks they brought. I will admit I don't know nearly as much about Space Marine tanks as I do about, well, admittedly Imperial Guard tanks, just because those are freaking huge. But I do know they have a few really good long-range bombardment ones.
Oxy armored machines had been released onto every one of the handful of tower tops they now occupied, along with scores of supposed Imperial super soldiers.
Also, Fan just mentioned apparently in original canon, Rancisis did die, but in Disney canon, there's a section showing a list of surviving Jedi, and Rancisis was on it. So they unkilled him to later kill him. Or they're just going to use the story later because why not? Yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Were they creating a space to retreat into? Were these big metal boxes some kind of artillery, like the ATTEs, SPHAs, or the AV7s? He did not know
Those are all
enough
words.
about them to be sure, and the emotions he read from the deployed Space Marines were muted at best, to the point where Rancisis began to wonder if they were not, in truth, droids. The Serpentine
Because their
Jedi
emotions
reached
are
up with
uniform,
one of his
so they feel
hands
muted,
and
not nearly
tapped
as
against the
uncontrolled.
communicator bead on the side of his head.
Captain Fordo, I do not trust this approach. Before we fall into their proper firing range, I want you to send out some LAT LEs to scout and assess their anti-air capabilities. Probe their defenses with a preemptive strafe.
He directed.
At your order, General.
Was the veteran clone's communicated response. Oppo then watched on through the force and minds of the assigned clones and pilots as their nimble, city-oriented variant gunships sped ahead of the rest of their airborne force.
So he's not just doing the usual battle meditation with most Jedi. He's actually actively getting information to plot out based on how his clones are feeling and reacting. So he knows faster than the report that shit's going down when he can feel the change in how they're thinking. That's... Yeah, I can see why people said this is one of the more competent guys.
He was pleased to see that Captain Fordo had split the probing force to 4 separate swarms of craft. 2 groups to enter combat from above, and 2 to enter from below. The actual damage these ships did was negligible. But there were few gunships fielded by the Republic which were more maneuverable amongst the densely packed cityscapes of places like Axum and Coruscant than the smaller, agile LE variants. Rancisis hoped this would increase their ability to evade enemy fire and survive the probing of their defenses, his mind focusing more completely upon the run as they closed in on their targets. Right away, Rancisis felt his hopes falter as the above gunships were engaged first. Contrary to what he had suspected, a fair amount of the square tanks deployed by the Imperium were anti-air armaments.
What?
Something revealed in hideous fashion.
Because they know they don't have air superiority, because they don't have orbital superiority, so they're planning around giving themselves a bubble, so you'd have to fire from orbit. Okay, that's still missing the fact that they need to fire. Oh, but didn't another fleet just arrive in orbit as well? No, because I think they still don't have orbital superiority. Unless they got a shield generator to make sure they don't get blown from orbit, though. What would just straight anti-air do? Or is this one of those things that you kind of just hand wave away in both, well, Warhammer and Star Wars? Probably wave away. I mean, in Star Wars, there is a bunch of ground shooting, so I guess it works. And actually in 40K, you kind of hand wave it away because they build shit that could actually stand up to orbital bombardment. But I don't think that's the case yet.
As their top-mounted turrets lifted and fired, they spilled hundreds of thousands of thick, almost head-sized rounds of solid ammunition into the sky. The superheated streams of steel moving far faster than blaster rounds ever had a chance to be, and moving into both separate groups of skyward flyers that the Republic had deployed. Right away, Oppo's mind went to work, connecting brains, lending instincts to the gunners and the pilots alike as he sought to help them avoid the hazardous cascade of shells that came.
Wait, so he can attach onto non-Jedi to give information. Okay, that is, clones are competent enough. If they got a Jedi giving them extra data, why did they... Okay, I was about to ask why they didn't just make this guy lead everyone, but then I realized because that would be actually competent and Palpatine would probably not like that.
Came hurtling towards them, but he quickly realized that it was for naught, as Master Rancisis came to understand that it was not the volume of the shots they fired that made these platforms deadly, it was their aim. To call them unerring would be an understatement. The rain of shredding bullets not only tracking each gunship with near perfection, but also anticipating their most likely veers of escape and filling those
Stardy's gunners,
with
man.
death as well. It took less than 9 seconds for all of the gunships that had approached from above to become little more than shredded balls of fire and metal, spinning out and colliding into the surrounding cityscape, or they did not simply detonate in the air. Rancisis felt every single loss, every snuffed mind, and every terrified, doomed thought from the troopers who had survived the initial volley.
He's really
to die in the following collisions.
Damn.
But he would not let those lives be in vain, for they had revealed something vital and something he would not soon forget. Approaching
Because
as
they were
had to land troops directly onto the rooftops that the Astartes now occupied was blatant suicide. Now he turned his focus on the lower two groups, who evaded the anti-air fire of the tanks, becoming the attention of the Space Marines who manned the
low
rims
to avoid
of the towers.
kill zone.
This time, the gunships were able to come into effective range of their own weapons, opening up their strafing runs with volleys from their missile launchers and laser cannon turrets. Rancisis sent them all the premonition.
Wait. They have laser cannon and missiles? So these are probably not Primaris style. These are more... Oh, no, wait, they were bigger. I thought they were bigger because heavy cybernetics, like a specific former Legion or chapter augmentation and or mutation. Kind of like the Black Dragons having horns everywhere. But maybe they are Primaris in how Fan was talking about them being bigger? But I don't remember much of the Primaris having rockets, so maybe it is firstborn tanks? Or I'm overthinking this and that's just not something Fan cares about, which is entirely possible as well.
That even as they passed their attack runs, they needed to stay below the line of the enemy's anti-air defenses, but it was a warning most would not need to hear. The Space Marines along the edges of the spire opened fire at the exact same moment, most wielding slug throwers which issued forth highly explosive rounds, with a few bringing to bear rapidly dispensing cannons that were not unlike those wielded by the tanks, and even several man-portable air defense systems in the forms of missile and rocket launchers. All of these weapons had devastating effects on the gunships, ripping not only the vessels to pieces in startlingly short order, but even tearing the missiles fired at them from the sky with coordinated flurries of fire which matched the accuracy of the tanks.
Oh, I wish that was a thing you can do in game. I legitimately wish you had a way to shoot down rockets rather than just save on them. That would be so cool. It's like, yeah, you can give up shooting for a round, but you can shoot down anyone shooting you. Because bullshit accuracy. Oh, God, I wish that was a thing in game.
The Jedi Master realized then that the reports of these Space Marines, how heavily armed they were, and how proficient they had shown themselves to be in battle, was no overstatement. If anything, their prowess had been understated. Not one of the probing craft made it back, even with Rancisis lending them his power and battle meditation. Their firing lines were too tight, their weapons too effective, the Republic's options for approach being far, far too limited. The Jedi Master looked to the sky, thinking to call in a limited bombardment from the reinforcing Star Destroyers.
Oh, so he actually is calling it an orbital bombardment. Nice that they're actually thinking about that. Also, Josh and everyone else is apparently mentioning that when it was talking about lasers and rocket launchers, that was from the Star Wars LATs or LAATs. The names are also similar. I'm never going to get them straight. But essentially the Star Wars side, not the Warhammer side. Okay.
But one glance was all he needed to know that this tactic would be just as costly and nearly as likely to fail.
Why?
Hovering above them all, the high-orbit airspace of the battle was being actively contended and currently dominated by the behemoth vessels of the Space Marines. Tens of Venators were attempting to surround the comparatively few vessels, but...
Tens. Because this is the remnant of what came from the initial counterattack from the Star Wars side. And even though the larger bulk of the 40K side did pull back, they let the Space Marines go at the end. So this is just contested orbit by the Space Marine ships then. Okay. But that's the entire ship crewed by Space Marines, so higher spec, I guess.
Second by second, they were being blown out of the sky. If anything, they needed aid before all of their ship support was spent throwing itself against them.
Captain,
I
want
grabbing
you
them
to
with
send
spores?
back an order to Field Command. Tell them to deploy
Sure, that
the
can go bad.
SPHAs and have them begin reinforcing the Venators in orbit with all the firepower they can.
Oh.
We need to destroy or force away those Imperial capital ships.
Ordered
Accurate.
Oppo.
Aye, sir. And what about the approach?
Asked the captain.
We are veering down. I am dismissing the notion of a direct assault. Instead, we will safely deploy several levels lower into the spires but outside of their weapons range. We will move our forces up through the tower's levels, and once we come within a certain distance, we will deploy obscurification smoke to isolate their effective reach.
Has that been effective against
Then we
them?
will begin fighting our way up towards them, level by level. Once we have enough of their defenses distracted by our forces, I will call in air support to harry them as we push them back.
The legendary Jedi explained.
Right, dispersing the orders now, sir.
Affirmed the clone captain, calming the rest of their large battle group, with Oppo feeling the shift in their direction right away. He knew that Master Coleman wanted fast results, but he would have to settle for the smoke they would soon deploy to block the enemy's ability to aim at the Basilica grounds from here. Rancisis had overseen impossible battles and objectives before, and it was never desperation or the press to rush that availed them victory. Only careful consideration and preservation of forces yielded long-lasting results, and he would win this battle in the same way he had won the siege of Salukami. With serenity, discipline, and faith in the Force, he would cleave through the red chaos of war.
Oh. Man, that is the second time you've had a self-assured, calm character saying how that they just need to follow procedure to win. The last time you did it, we got berserker-possessed clones. I'm not sure if you're going to do it to this guy because plot armor, and I guess plot armor really counts here, even though the plot at this point in canon would have also seen him dead. So, not sure if that would help, but that sounds like a leading line to how are you going to make this guy lose in a way that builds up the tactical acumen of the Space Marines? Because that feels like what you're about to do here.
And match his wits against the battle acumen of the Space Marines. And he would prevail, if the Force willed it.
Coleman Kaj. I'm never going to be able to say that name. people even told me how already, and I already
Coleman
fucked it up.
K-Cash watched from
Yep,
his
never gonna
gunship,
get that right.
observing with his underslung eyes as the towers in the distance were gradually crowned with
Didn't get it
tall
last time,
plumes
not
of
gonna get it this
shimmering
time.
black smoke. Each rising column emanated from the windows far below their tops, near the center portions of the spires, rising in blooming pillars which obscured all that lay above them. The alien Jedi general snorted in mild disapproval, but reined in his emotions. While he had been hoping that Oppo's forces would have been able to engage the Imperials in a more direct and immediate contest, he also knew well enough not to doubt Master Rancisis or his choice in tactics. The Jedi Master gave a final, reluctant grunt and looked down into his own battlefield. He hovered above it inside of his command LAAT, Commander Neo still at his side. He and his forces would wait no longer. After all, the vast army below him had already done as he had ordered them to do. The entire Imperial perimeter around their temple was now secured. Repulsor tanks, walkers, and juggernauts stood or hovered in rings around their final fortification, ready to scramble, fire, and bombard at his command. Standing between and around Coleman's armored support was nearly an entire legion of eager clone troopers.
Oh, wow.
Various ranks and subtypes standing proud and at the ready. Flying above the assembled warriors of the Republic were all the various gunships which had carried them here. Gunships where the majority of their fellow Jedi Knights lingered, watching over the entire scene like divine scions, ready to act. At his nod, the command was given, and most of the Force-empowered warriors descended down, taking direct command of the breaching squads and shock troops. Those brave clones who would be the first into the cracks and access points of the religious fortress which loomed before them.
So they're doing breaching clones with Jedi shock troopers. You know, against any other force, very few other forces than the Sisters, that actually might be a good choice. I'm assuming there's going to be a lot more Deny the Witch test rolled.
The whole place was locked up tight. Every shutter closed, the internal landing bays sealed, even the pillboxes and turret emplacements having been boarded up with bands of folding metal. But none of those barriers would remain in place for long. This K-Cash knew well. He was moments, mere moments from ordering the first penetrative salvos when something utterly unexpected occurred.
What?
Something that had Coleman's alien eyes swiveling and bobbing on the ends of their low stalks.
What
The
would he
front gates of the
expect?
basilica began to screech, the enormous figures carved into them swinging open to lend passage
charging?
not to the legion outside, but to some force from within.
Prepare for them.
Coleman ordered down to all his forces through his communications bead.
What do they still have inside that would be worth saving? Because I don't think the virus bomb would count because that's being handled maybe at the moment. I thought it's entirely possible that 40K side would just say fuck it and charge. That does seem to be a thing, but I feel like I'm missing. This is the Sisters. They probably have an entire store of penitent engines just to say fuck it, do it.
The
But we already had
sounds
them
of
revealed,
thousands
though.
of blaster rifles and orienting
Maybe it
laser
wouldn't be
cannons
them.
being angled towards the doors filled the air densely. The clones giving a resounding shout as captains gave their orders and sergeants ensured they were carried out. But where Coleman expected a suicidal charge of hundreds or even thousands of desperate Imperials,
Yeah?
he once more found his predictions subverted. Only a single figure emerged from the depths of the basilica, lumbering, massive in size and bulk. For what that figure lacked in companions, it clearly made up for with enormous size, armor,
How big we talking?
and armament. What Master K-Cash could only assume to be some kind of massive droid began to stomp its way out of the basilica, clanking and thumping.
Do they have a knight?
Its movements were, at once, rigid in fashion, yet somehow bearing an odd, subtle smoothness. An intention within the
Smoothness?
details of its forward march that K-Cash was unused to seeing in any, save perhaps the likes of General Grievous and the ruinous bounty hunter known as Dirge. Its armor was purple in color and covered in Imperial livery and words of various kinds. Its shape was almost box-like,
Okay, so we have a box, like, well, shape, purple, but that's... I'm pretty sure they're describing an old-fashioned Dreadnought, but the purple part is throwing me off there. Who had purple? Because I don't think this is a relic from the Horus Heresy, because this is from the Crusade timeline in the 40K, not 30K side. Is it? Yeah, I guess the Indominus Crusade was a full-on crusade. I wonder if... I know it's not Rylan, because every time I hear purple Dreadnought, that's where my mind goes, even though I know he's more pink. It's not, because I'm pretty sure he'd be canonically dead by this point, and that would be such a massive ass pull on fan side that he would have had to never have already used that to get someone like Commissar Kane in this one. That would be funny if that happened.
Despite the relative nimbleness with which it was moving, but
also,
by
I think he was a
far
different
its
type of
most
Dreadnought, not
notable
boxy.
features were those found at its center and those which composed its chosen weapon. In one of its enormous, gauntlet-like hands, the machine was carrying an absolutely colossal blade.
Gotta love allergies. Or the fact that right before coming in here, I decided to pet the kitties who I'm allergic to and then rub my eyes. I rub my eyes and I have to sneeze again. Son of a bitch. There we go.
The sword was easily taller than the being wielding it was, lying.
Oh, Josh, the tempered hands color is purple and white. And their chapter master was a Dreadnought. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. The boxy part threw me off because that sounds like an old school Dreadnought, where this one sounded much more like a, well, I guess a Redemptor would be kind of boxy. Just the old school ones are the most boxy of boxy Dreadnoughts ever.
Lines of sparking lightning and power coursing up and down the length of the weapon. And in the center of its boxy body was what appeared to be a coffin, engraved with a human skeleton at rest, arms crossed over its chest. This strange sarcophagus ended in what appeared for all the world to be a skull-like helmet, which tilted and turned to regard the army as it emerged. Naturally,
the helmet can move? I don't know why that's the part that throws me off here. I'm just not used to... Like, this is mostly decoration from what I've seen. The fact that he still has enough bodily control within a Dreadnought to actually move his own head is actually a little shocking to me. Considering what they usually do to butcher up a person to fit into the coffin. So, yeah.
Coleman had only a few moments to observe the
Brutalis pattern
before the clones and tanks opened fire upon it, taking aim and dispensing death as soon as the Imperial droid exited the building. Thousands of rifles began pouring a rain of blazing blue into its resilient hull, and green bolts and beams began to find it as laser cannons and composite lasers were primed
shield,
and
I'm
readied.
assuming.
The machine warrior stood against it for only a handful of seconds.
But then...
most of the prayer scrolls which were mounted across its body burning up. Its Imperial feet only managing to stagger and stumble partway down the stairs leading up to the entrance before the entire construct was forced down to its knees. The droid-like walker kneeled into the shadow of its weapon, hull blazing as it slammed the blade of its enormous sword into the stone beneath it. An act the Jedi thought symbolized their victory over it, a belief which was dispelled less than a second later.
Is it praying?
As soon as the war machine did this, Coleman was forced to shield his sensitive eyes, closing them and turning away as the walker exploded into a radiant corona of energy. Or at least, it seemed to explode, though more and more, Master K-Kaj was doubting that this had actually occurred.
Is that prayer to the Emperor and a chaplain, chapter master, Dreadnought, or psychic power? Honestly, either way at this point, there's a very good chance that they're identical either way. But details aside, okay, I'm assuming it's a litany of hate.
Fire continued to be poured against it, rockets and mass drivers being thrown into
Honestly,
the
if there's no
volley,
litanies at this point,
and
they changed, I don't remember
soon,
them.
the brilliance being released from the target had intensified so much that K-Kaj could not block it out even with his eyelids closed and his eyes covering over his stalks. Within only a few moments, no one could stand to look at the source of light long enough to aim their weapons at it without going blind.
Hold your fire. Hold your fire.
Oh, it's a
K-Cash
refractor shield?
yelled into his
Dude,
comms
that's even
device,
cooler.
and shortly after, his orders were followed. The now largely inaccurate shots dying down rapidly, clones and Jedi groaning and covering their faces. And
2+
yet,
saves, man.
when K-Cash's eyes began to recover, he was shocked to see that the bipedal Imperial machine was still intact. Kneeling where it had stopped, a shimmering shell of energy slowly dimming around its body. Even after the shield had vanished, the mechanical warrior did not rise, did not attack, and did not make any overt movement. Master Coleman K-Cash found himself puzzled, his irregular eyes regaining their clarity faster than those of his human clones and several of his Jedi fellows.
Oh?
What was the nature of this droid warrior? Was it meant as some kind of emissary, someone the Imperials had sent to surrender, or was it truly just another pointlessly aggressive weapon?
I mean, he's half right. It is a very aggressive weapon. But surrender? I don't think so.
Keep your guard up. Order our forces to return fire into it the moment it seems hostile, or I give the command. And take me down there. I need to be the one to confront it.
Ordered Master Coleman.
General,
maybe
I
not the
hardly
best
think
option.
that's-
Commander Neo began to say.
That is an order, Commander Neo. Execute.
The
Jedi and their love of being directly in the field when the really competent battle strategist is actually better not being in combat. Yeah, he did.
Jedi Master asserted.
He is
The
so
clone
dead.
hesitated for a moment, but then nodded reluctantly and went further
Looking
into
for
the
a
cabin
new
to
commander?
contact the pilot. In moments, the LAAT gunship was hovering over the scene, and Coleman K-Cash was jumping off, landing closest to the odd machine, rising with a flourish and activating his green lightsaber. The Jedi Master approached and was about to speak when, suddenly, it spoke instead, blaring out a sentence in Galactic Basic through several loudspeakers built into its bulky
Not going to be
hull.
pleasant, whatever it is.
Are you lord among these witches and false men?
The walker asked in a deep, resonating voice. Coleman's eyes swiveled somewhat, but he nodded his head, slowly approaching the kneeling Dreadnought.
I am commanding officer here, yes.
Said the alien, sweeping his
After the
saber out
threats.
probingly, squinting as his blade touched across the invisible shield.
Good to see that the chapter master has a massive sense of drama on this one. Because, dear God, man, going out there, let them know that their shield is better than their fire against them, and then just address them. It's like, you have already brought your leader. Excellent, I don't have to search. I didn't realize this is the Tempered Hands who are drama queens.
His sword of light's glowing tip revealed its boundary, the Aegis illuminating once more with a bright white phosphorus shine.
Also, it's been mentioned in the chat that the art here is amazing. When it was zoomed in further, I thought that was a picture of a model. It's only when we got further out and saw everyone else like, oh, no, wait, this is actually an art piece that fan probably commissioned. Yeah. Like, I'll be honest, I thought Fan just had a personally custom painted model he took a picture of in front of some generic terrain in the background. No, it's art. Yeah, it's really good.
He could see the plasma cycling in his blade being absorbed rapidly, his saber shrinking momentarily,
They recycle
bobbing
plasma?
against the touch of the shield as the fifth form of matter which composed it was drained out and then replenished by his own kyber crystal.
And what
That's how that works?
precisely are you? An emissary? A droid?
Coleman asked in return, taking a step back and watching as the radiance retreated once more. He could hear it now. A high-pitched buzz, potentially beyond what humans could pick up, yet this close he could not help but notice it. The shield was converting matter, even plasma, which made contact with it into raw light, and though Coleman K-Cash was never a deeply technological Jedi, he had to appreciate the strangeness of this method of shielding technology.
I am Sebastian Vondrel, Arch-imbalancer of the Tempered Hands chapter of the Emperor's Angels of Death.
And so far the most
Responded the large,
straightforward and
mechanized
polite
man,
one.
its skull-faced helmet
Soon
tilting
it's light and
ever so
soon.
slightly to track Coleman as the Jedi Master began to pace back and forth in front of the machine.
And while I am now composed of more iron than meager flesh, I remain, as I have always been, a human man, and an Adeptus Astartes.
Now, that is actually a very interesting description, because the fact that he would acknowledge himself as just a human man and then add on an Adeptus Astartes is kind of fascinating. A lot of chapters, a lot of the traitors, of course, and a huge proportion of the loyalists and the, let's call them loyalists, do not view themselves as standard humans. Hell, there's a lot of humans who don't view them as humans. They're transhuman. They're separate from humanity. They're not a person anymore. They're not a human. The fact that he would just flat out say, I am a human, is actually kind of fascinating to me, because it makes him kind of fit in and figure in more of a, this is going to sound weird, humanistic form. It's why he probably fit in better and listened to the Inquisitor, why he could actually talk to people, he would defer to others. This is a much more pro-human Astarte than a lot of Astartes would ever get to. They usually just hold themselves so much further. Honestly, if it wasn't so much blatant a chapter following in the traditions of the Iron Hands, I would have sworn this was a Salamander successor.
I am no machine. I am empowered by them.
It rumbled. This had Coleman blinking in renewed surprise, pausing his pacing as he observed Sebastian with new understanding. He also could not help but notice the damage upon the carapace of the evidently entombed warrior, or rather, the lack thereof. The blaster fire, even before the shield had been raised, had done next to nothing, failing to scorch anything other than the prayer scrolls which clung to the Space Marine's hull. The heavier laser cannons had managed to leave shallow impact craters in several places, which still smoked.
In the chat, everyone's talking about how they are so excited, let's use that word, for upcoming scenes in this section. Fan, what did you do? I've seen your community, man. I know that they have a lot of thirst. Let's put it that way. Oh, God.
And glowed dully with residual heat. A continued bombardment of those weapons would have worn it down in a few seconds, and had succeeded in shoving the mech around. Yet it seemed that the shield had been raised before too much effectual damage could actually be inflicted, and the missiles and mass drivers of the clones had been entirely warded off by the technology within the Space Marine's iron body. It was an impressive display, but not one which would enable this warrior to challenge the forces arrayed before him, and if the Imperial dared to rise from his kneeling position, Coleman knew he would not last more than 15 seconds at best.
You
But
are a Space Marine. You're larger than I'd imagined, and your foe far more outnumbered.
really, fan? One of the most famous quotes from A New Hope is, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? And now we have, you're a little tall for a Space Marine, or taller than I imagine. It's so close. It almost feels like a shout out to the beginning of that, which I don't think is intentional, but it's hilarious to see that on the other side.
K-Kaj stated, waving his free hand back over the assembled army.
I assume you've come to surrender.
The Jedi Master concluded.
Nah.
Correct.
The Space Marine announced at once. K-Kaj took a step back, the machine's joints beginning to rumble.
I am an angel of death, and I have not come to surrender.
Spoke the ancient warrior.
Then why have you come?
To kill you.
Yelled K-Kaj, the men all around him re-centering their weapons to the best of their ability.
They hadn't
many still
before?
blinking spots out of their eyes.
Because of the light,
I
yeah.
have come to
Close enough.
destroy you.
I'm just going to say it. He's actually probably so far the nicest one we've met of all the Space Marines. I mean, without being anyone who has to do with Commissar Kane, because those guys are all kind of weird. But yeah, no, he's actually being polite enough to express that, yes, no, I'm here to kill you. Please die. It's the most polite murder I've ever seen. I'm assuming we're moving to his perspective.
They have deployed some kind of smoke. It is black and shimmering, and it is blocking our auto senses and direct
apparently it
targeting
is good
Airier
against that.
rays.
Reported Force Commander Belarus Harfan. The Force Commander stood amongst the many busy serfs of the chapter as they moved the munition, prepared and manned tanks and turrets, and continued arming the Melta charges.
What?
All of his battle brothers,
Melta
the
charges?
recently enhanced Marines of the Tempered Hands chapter,
What are they
were
planning to
armed
destroy?
and out, ready to repel another attack with extreme prejudice.
Probably more trap. Okay.
Before him was the only Marine not holding a gun, the captain of the 9th Company, Disporus Taltan.
Then they are trying to obscure our vision of the Basilica. Is the new spirit connection we have with Sebastian compromised?
Asked the captain,
And they
himself
wouldn't even
seated
need
in
it
a deployed
otherwise.
command nodule, wires and cables linking thickly into his head, the powerful machinery around him extending various sensor probes and rotating dishes into the air, which bobbed and waved of their own accord.
No, Captain. It seems that their countermeasure is not sufficient to sever that link, especially.
Okay, this is actually kind of funny because I looked up what a noosphere actually was. Oddly enough, in a completely unrelated video that had nothing to do with 40K, apparently a noosphere is an actual metaphysical concept of an information gestalt mind of a planet or an entire species or concept within a, well, planet area. It's either the planet itself with everything or the species itself within that area. So, yeah, I didn't realize it was something 40K did not make up. If they're not just bullshitting it, then they're literally talking through psychic powers right now. And the noosphere is literally tech magic. More blatant if that is actually there, not just a fancy word they decided to steal. So it's just kind of funny where the technological faction is literally doing magic.
Especially not with the Wing of Iron directly overhead. The Republic is moving its forces rapidly up towards us, however. I estimate a 98.2% chance of engaging them in less than 7 minutes.
Said Belarus.
Very good. All is progressing according to the predictions of the Temperance Engine and the Arch Imbalancer.
Was the 9th Captain's response.
Keep an eye on their activities to the best of your ability and lead the counterattack on them once their initial assault has begun. Fall back and allow them to occupy zones 7 through 9. Get as many.
They're leading them into a trap, and that's where they're preparing melted charges. So they're falling back to make them stand on the explosive plates. Got it. Or explosive charge area, whatever. Also, when I said the thing about a noosphere is not the Adeptus Mechanicus, I mean, in universe, yeah, it's Mechanicus. It's basically the internet. But the fact that they pulled that wording from something that existed before Games Workshop as an actual concept that people believed might be real, I mean, it's also functionally just the internet now, but whatever. It's just kind of funny because maybe that was a bit of their intention. Granted, it's early Games Workshop's intention was let's just take funny sounding words and use them. Yeah, close enough.
That close as you can, but do not allow them to penetrate zones 6 and under. I will continue to coordinate firing solutions with the Imbalancer. Current estimates dictate a 74.8% chance that his battle will begin at the same time as our own.
Oh, yeah.
I intend to have closed the margins of death by an additional 12.9% effectiveness by then.
Oh,
The
how many they
venerable
kill?
Space Marine ordered.
As you will it, 9th Captain. We will not fail in our precision. We will prove our worth to the chapter.
Announced the Force Commander,
Captain.
slamming his hammer-bearing fist against his
10th is
chest
usually scouts.
before turning and rallying his command squad, leading them personally down to where their battle was soon to begin. The 9th Captain nodded, a trickle of amusement sliding through the circuits and neurons of his augmented brain. He had been one of the most vocal when it came to questioning the statistical wisdom of embracing the gifts of the Lord Commander of the Imperium so readily. But these new Marines, while lacking in some doctrine, made up for it with zeal and a burning desire to become equal amongst their existing battle brothers of the chapter.
And that does confirm we do have a mix-up Primaris and Firstborn, so Fan is actually acknowledging that. I wasn't sure if he would or not.
In his mind, he could see these new Primaris Marines developing splendidly, and his own transformed body was adapting rapidly to his old augmentations.
Oh, so it's not just the gifts of the new Marines, it's gifts of being Primaris. And that's probably why they mentioned people were bigger than they thought, minus the Chapter Master, who's just a straight up Dreadnought at this point. Actually, can you take someone out of a Dreadnought and Primaris them to get around that bullshit? Because technically, they were less dead than Marneus Calgar is, so... Yeah, but that's also plot relevant and model sale relevant, so that's completely different.
The Jedi had faced the wrath of the Firstborn, and had been found wanting. Now they would be confronted by the keen tactics of the newly elevated Tempered Hands, and Captain Desporus had little doubt they would be found wanting once more. He was fast coming to accept that none could withstand the might of the Rubicon. None could survive it, save those who had crossed it. However, he pushed those thoughts aside for now, and focused on his own task. His mind was relayed up into the Wing of Iron, and then through the Temperance Engine itself, before being sent back down to the planet below, connecting directly with the mind of his de facto Chapter Master. Already he was receiving the indirect targeting solutions he would need to be effective in spite of the countermeasure that the Republic was throwing against them. Desporus did not need to voice any further commands, did not need to give any orders out loud at all. The honored chapter serfs of his armored company received their instructions through the implants within their brains, the same ones that enabled them to connect to their vaunted war machines. The whirlwinds began to turn their heads, empowered men standing beside them, ready to rapidly reload the tanks with their special...
Oh, so this isn't actually being run by Astartes. They have the serfs running the tech. That's actually a lot more than I thought a lot of chapters would actually give to anyone who wasn't explicitly a Space Marine in their own right. Kind of shocking, actually, when you think about it. I don't know why it's that way, but okay, sure.
Specialized munitions, which stood in tall stacks only an arm's reach away. They had enough power to level the entire basilica and everything around it 9 times over. With precision, the 9th captain of the Tempered Hands corrected the turreted heads, moving them ever so slightly, personally programming each warhead with its destined coordinates.
Individual
They were the storm of iron. They were the hail of fire. And he was the eye of the storm, staring down, ready.
If he just says approaching, I swear to God.
To
or
strike.
to Emperor. Oh, and we're going directly to the Chapter Master.
Sebastian's mind was a maze of history, theory, flesh, and iron.
Fan, I know you're probably doing the Jedi we just saw. I don't care. This is one of the most disturbing images you've brought up, and it's really creepy.
It was a cage in which he trapped all factors and bent them to his will by the strength of pure, bladed logic. Simultaneous calculations ran between the canyons of his intact gray matter like cold water. His augmentations sieving away all fallacy with the unrelenting nature of the will that was born within him. His dual-phase shield, a relic of the heresy, had drained almost 1/6 of the power reserves provided by his immensely strong plasmic reactors. This would have constituted a serious problem if he intended to be within prolonged combat. But that was not the case this time.
What is he doing then?
And he gladly took
Because he
the loss
assumes
of
he'll kill
power
them all
as
quicker.
more than sufficient sacrifice for what he was about to do. He eyed the Jedi alien who strutted before him through his multi-spectrum Auspex arrays that now served as his eyes. He powered his joints and servos, those portions of his new, enhanced body whirring and moaning as they were brought fully online in preparation for what he was sure would be an inevitability.
And how do you expect to destroy me?
With violence?
Asked the Witch Lord.
Oh, come on, it had to be
green
said.
Skin rippling with colors that were not truly visible, but rather representations of temperature changes.
Oh, he
The
sees the
thing was
temperature change.
chastened by Sebastian's threat, but bold enough to challenge it. This amused the human parts of the Space Marine, but for his iron mind, it was no more than pointless bluster. The Arch-Imbalancer did not engage in bluffs or idle taunts.
I will call the whirlwind, and it will sweep you all away.
Whirlwind launchers. It sounds like a taunt, but it's actually an exact description of what you're doing. And he already has a shield up, so he doesn't need to fight. He just lets them all come out of cover and think he's out of cover, but he is still in cover because he has the shield.
He answered simply, voice rumbling in the air.
I mean, the taunt is actually getting them in the right place.
Spirit of preservation, I will make you one offer, Witch Knight. Retreat from this place. Leave it be.
Okay, I thought this guy was the most humane Space Marine ever. He is explicitly giving it out a chance to retreat to an explicit alien who was also using psychic power. I mean, if he wasn't absolutely certain the guy would no way, shape, or form take him up on this, it would be insane. But it's also the nicest thing I've seen in Space Marine 2, even though they know there's no way it's going to happen. But still... God damn. Yeah. Time to call the whirlwind.
Then you will live. If you do not, then you will
By the power of God and all these bullets.
Said Sebastian, extending Guilliman's mercy through his ultimatum. But he only offered it so openly because he knew it would be denied. And so it was.
Yep.
The alien knight did not even seem to pause to consider it, shaking his odd, upside-down skull and clicking in his throat.
We are the Jedi. We do not fear the wind nor the storm.
What about the one that comes with bullets?
From the leads of the Republic. Surrender to us, and we will ensure you are treated fairly.
I don't think so.
If only being brought to trial and made to answer for the crimes you have committed against this planet. Consider this your one offer, Space Marine. Take it, or it'll become one with the Force.
The Jedi Master
I don't think he would know what
back.
that means.
You will, Jedi.
Pronounced the old warrior, some bemusement leaking into his robotic tone.
We will not surrender.
Don't expect you
The
to.
witch snapped back rapidly, almost angrily. The Dreadnought's head turned from side to side in a denial.
No, witch. You will not surrender. You will learn to fear the storm. My storm. My whirlwinds.
Considering I'm pretty sure there was an entire meta in 40K for multiple sessions in multiple editions where it was get the whirlwinds, shoot everything from out of line of sight. Yeah, I don't think Fan was channeling that, but it's funny that everything being described here sounds stupid if you don't have context, but is also legitimately in canon an actual way to win a game. I think it's been nerfed out of the ground though currently.
Sebastian had time.
Not
his
into the ground,
spoken
like just
words
completely
with
out of it. You're not even on
information
plan
being
anymore.
streamed through his mind by the powerful new spirit connection he was linked
What if they
into.
name things dumb
the
for this
Jedi's
reason
alien,
alone?
stalk eyes widening for a moment as he sensed the danger, but failed to grasp its nature. He raised his blade wardingly towards Sebastian, expecting the strike to come from him, only for the first volley from the whirlwind artillery tanks to fall all at once
And
in
release the
perfect
whirlwind.
synchronicity around them. The initial attack was
Drama
nowhere
Queen's
near
extreme.
Vondrel himself, a heavy layer of armor-piercing explosive rockets falling in a ring around the outermost line of the Republic's assembled encirclement. Chaos began its reign then,
Yep.
as massive explosions and flames began to geyser out from the heaviest surrounding vehicles, each and every single missile precisely aimed and guided down into the backs of the Republic's heavy armor.
And that's why he came out, because it gives them precise target information, because it already proved they have the noosphere connection, so he can feed them all the targeting data they could possibly need, huh?
Red mushroom clouds expanded
And
up from
draw
where
them
the
out.
armor was too thick to penetrate. But far more terrible were the effective missiles, venting the same kind of devastation into the interiors of tens of tanks. The titanic juggernauts fielded by the Republic absorbed the damage admirably, but even they, with their shielding and specialized armors, could not withstand such a densely packed attack. Their roofs rupturing and exploding in cascading, glorious fashion. Wheels detonated and melted, turrets were blown off of armored shells, and command centers were eviscerated and filled with purifying flames. Death rained down on the clones for nearly 5 entire seconds, missile after missile cramming itself into the hollowed husks of the behemoth tanks.
Yep.
And ripping legged vehicles apart, creating a
Did
wall
he
of
survive it,
burning,
though?
melting wrecks which surrounded the assembled force in steel-eating pyres of Alpha Primus-grade promethium.
But
Focus was dragged out and away from the kneeling arch-imbalancer, shockwaves from the blasts rippling across the mass of white soldiers and hovering tanks like disturbances in water. Over half the clones and Jedi assembled were thrown from their feet, several of their lighter vehicles being blown away end over end into their masses, crushing any unfortunates enough to not have the force to aid their escape. The army was rocked, deafened, and shocked by the hell wrought within the prolonged cacophony, the first of many. So shocked were they, Replicae and Witch Knights both, that they failed to maintain their focus on Sebastian.
and then he decides to do something himself. Can't let all the youngins have the glory.
A lethal error.
Oh,
in their
this is gonna hurt
discipline,
them.
but
It's gonna be
one which was
fun.
understandable, even predicted, as
Dude. There we go. That should do it. I'm going to see if that reset it. I noticed the connection's been hovering in and out today. I'm seeing if this will fix the problems. If it had, nice. If it hasn't, well, that's going to suck. That should give it a few seconds to keep up. All right. Start it up from there.
As the Dreadnought now demonstrated brutally,
I want to hear this
he
goes.
rose, double-layered shield dissolving as he did, his servos heated, his body prepared for the exertions to come.
Yeah?
This new form of his, this brutalis pattern Dreadnought, was a marvel. Never before.
You got me excited, fan. I know it's a brutality because people told me, but I was kind of thinking, wait, no, is it a Leviathan Dreadnought? Because that's what you have on screen right now, and I freaking love those things before they were legend ruled. Yeah. Still, though.
Or had Sebastian felt so powerful, not even in his former body of steel. The venerable encasement of his former Dreadnought had been powerful, durable, but slow.
They
Ancient,
upgraded the Dreadnought?
sluggish to respond to his thoughts, movements always failing to capture even half of the grace he had wielded in life. This was different.
Dude.
The neural links that now synced him with the war machine his body had become sank deep, deep into his mind, providing a reactivity and fearsome
Permanent
dexterity
Terminator
that
armor,
harkened
man.
him back to his time before his first death. He gloried in it, made full use of it, even though he knew that this very link, the same technology that would enable the impossible, was also a poison. Each wire, each newly crafted Mechanicus fiber, was a dangerous river of corrosion which would, in time, erode him into nothing.
I mean, to be completely fair, considering how long some Dreadnoughts live, that doesn't mean shit. Granted, they live that long because they're literally frozen between fights, so... Actually, he's a chapter master. Would he still even have that problem? I don't know.
That was why he constrained himself, why he had descended from the heavier weapons of his recent past to the pure simplicity of his blade. Sebastian Vondrel swept his sword horizontally. The Jedi Master he had been conversing with only now turning back to see the strike coming.
Does he deflect, dodge, or
Impressively,
die?
the comparatively tiny warrior caught the Arch-Imbalancer's Siegebreaker Warblade with his own green sword. And even more impressively, the weapon held its integrity against his own. Yet, the same could not be said for the feat of the warrior behind it, as the Jedi Witch Lord was batted away tens of meters into the air and back into the mass
Mass does
of
have
his
an effect,
army.
apparently.
Clones began to return fire on him, but he barely gave them an opportunity to sight their shots, charging down into them, offhand batting away a missile fired in his direction as his chest-mounted dual storm bolters began their assault, ripping into the infantry who stood before them. They were raked with hundreds of exploding rounds, fired at a rate which turned them into white-clad gore and clouds of blood before the Arch-Imbalancer himself was among them. He swept his enormous relic blade through their lines like a reaper, utterly annihilating most who were caught in his path with the oversized power field his warblade was wreathed within, atomizing the bodies of any clones in his way and most Jedi. Those witches who survived did so by evasion or by blocking his enormous weapon with their own, shoving
Being
other soldiers
thrown away.
aside with their warp abilities to make way as they skidded over the ground. One of the knights
many
of
blocks was
Jedi
together?
leapt up, twirling in the air before landing on the flat of Sebastian's sword, running up it and towards him.
I thought most swords were... Does he have a power sword he didn't turn on, or is this literally just a giant slab of metal? You know what? It's probably both. And if it hasn't been turned on yet, I think that Jedi's about to lose their feet.
In response, the master of the tempered hands flared his power sword's field,
Yeah.
transforming the warrior into screaming ashes, not even pausing to consider the act as the Space Marine swept his blade through the
there it
blackened
goes.
cloud that was once the Jedi. His stride never broke as he continued his attack, bolters blitzing with fire and rage, mechanical legs defiantly lithe against his bulk as he passed the sword through even more Republic soldiers.
God damn, that sounds so freaking cool. This is the one moment where, even though I don't have this exact model, Dreadnought or Dreadnought style units with giant ass swords are really awesome. Even though every edition of the game seems to make them worse and worse, they look so cool. I mean, I got into the Grey Knights explicitly, partially doing a Bricky video, but prior to that, because I liked the baby carrier aesthetic with the giant sword. I know, I'm probably like the only person who did, but yeah, I thought it was funny.
The clone forces and even some of the tanks began to focus their attacks against him, but now that he was in close among the crowd,
Yep.
as it were, they were forced to temper their volleys, unable to simply assail him as they had without destroying all the men around Sebastian. All the while, the Arch Imbalancer was being updated as to what would happen next, thanks to the linked mind of his knight
Because he knows where
captain.
they're aiming.
Sebastian's massive body spun and crouched, avoiding two whistling blasts from mass driver cannons which slammed into the basilica walls behind him, reaping the lives of another squadron of replicate with the same movement. He then
I almost wish we had seen this from the outside to just see the sheer shock of someone who is explicitly not a Jedi moving with what looks like to the outside the predictive foresight of a Jedi. That would be so freaking cool. I mean, it's cool from the inside view too, though.
but
we won't understand what we're seeing if we had the outside
not
version.
away from the speeding form of a hovering tank, its turret spinning to face him and firing point blank into the Arch Imbalancer's iron body. But Sebastian had grasped
Did
the
nothing.
lip of the tank with his offhand, easily lifting the light vehicle up, the shots sailing over him as they were fired.
This is why
The
I wish you could
body of
melee
the tank
tanks and
now
move them.
used as a makeshift shield. Deflectors and hull bursting and buckling as two other volleys from laser cannons and missiles collided into it. He then lifted the smoking wreck even higher, composite lasers from gunships high above strafing over it, slicing chunks out of the wreckage before the Dreadnought Lord contemptuously tossed what was left of the war machine aside, flipping it back onto the faces of the clones who had fired missiles at him.
Firing
The
right onto them.
masses of
throwing
replicate
it
and
onto them.
Jedi around him were shocked, and in those few bare faces, the old Astartes could see the recognizable signs of transhuman terror blossoming like fell roses across each expression. He knew what they must be thinking.
Oh,
what
shit.
thoughts were sweltering their minds and making so many hesitate.
The fact that you had that on clones who usually fight things that are, well, explicitly not human or not even sentient. The clones, they count, but with the droids, most of them probably wouldn't.
How could anything as large as him move like that? How could a construct of steel and ceramite that stood in excess of 13 feet tall bob and dodge and wield a sword as he was doing? He took a grim
I almost want to
satisfaction
see
in
nano
that.
machines.
Yes.
Not gonna fit.
Let
It'd be
them
awesome.
marvel. Let them fear. Let them suffer the glory of the Lord Commander's designs and the wrath of his greater father ever behind them all. He became their will, incarnate in ceramite and iron.
Fan? This is... Normally, I thought this was going to be a beatdown from his end to show the power of a full-on Primaris Dreadnought with an experienced and incredibly competent pilot. Essentially pilot. Occupant, whatever. But with his grandiose statements right here, I'm almost thinking something is going to change his mind. I'm not sure you would, because I don't think it fits the narrative or the direction you're going. But a lot of the times when someone builds something, yes, this is what we're doing it for, this is why I'm doing it, it's usually followed by something tearing down that basic assumption. But I don't think there's anyone left who could do that. Maybe I'm reading into it wrong, but that seems odd.
Pounding on the enemy without ever breaking his stride or showing any mercy. And he was not alone. The gunships of the Republic began to hover over him, crowding him like loitering vultures. The Tempered Hands did not suffer such things, however, and soon the second volley fell from the air, exploding well above the battle and scattering fist-sized balls of ceramite at sonic speeds. The sudden, sky-filling attack struck the gunships like birdshot fired into a dense pack of Cessian pigeons. The Republic craft jerking.
Sorry, I gotta sneeze quickly. Hate being seen sneezing. Sorry about that. Sorry, I hate sneezing on camera. I usually cut it out in like pre-recordings.
Wings breaking, engines shattering, missile stores detonating. They descended, spinning like burning fallen angels, crashing into the soldiers and tanks beneath them. One such gunship twisted in the air, free-falling into the Arch Imbalancer's direction, only to be punched from the sky with his free, mauled fist, smashed into three burning pieces as the Dreadnought continued his grisly work.
He just punched the ship out of the air!
In a duel with the Jedi all around him. They were growing accustomed now, and he admired how many of them shunted off the fear and the chaos all around them, minds honed onto the task of defeating him. Had they been contending with a mere Redemptor, a casual warrior encased in Brutalis armoring and machinery, then they may have succeeded. But as they began to surround him, outmaneuver him, carve into him,
they can be shot from distance.
Their burning blades halted and brought up short. Their swift strikes did a fine job of shearing away his ceramite skin wherever they attacked, but failed to bite into the refined adamantium skeleton which hid within. For Sebastian was the venerable first among equals who ruled the Tempered Hands. And his war gear was a reflection of his...
He basically ripped off a Custodes Dreadnought. Because those actually would have, I think, sheer adamantium. And he then plated it with ceramite. Oh my god! It's a good thing there's no Custodes on hand, because they might have something to say about that. Actually, their entire thing would be... And that would be excessive for them, so probably not even that much.
Status. His neurons surged with the power of command, scorching him with ecstatic control as he spun, his torso rotating unnaturally to throw them off, and catching two with the arc of his blade as he did, crushing a third in his free hand, crumpling the body of the Jedi like a bloody pile of twigs. However, as he ended his spin, he planted his blade into the ground, shield flaring to life and blinding the Jedi Knights and clones who struck at him.
Yeah,
one unwise warrior leapt into the field itself, unable to avert his path before it was too late. He fell into the conversion layer of the dual phase shield, and the effect was blinding and instantaneous. He screamed in desperate pain, body pulled apart as the matter which composed his airborne form was converted into bright, shimmering light. He fell to the ground, only half a man now, ignored by his comrades as the Jedi sought to surround Sebastian anew, waiting for his defense to fall once more.
God damn. Also, with that description, it almost sounds like the power field on the sword is just a more concentrated version of what's in the refractor field. They're probably related technologies then, if Fan's description is closer to canon. His own definitely sound very similar, though.
But before it did, something else fell instead.
Whirlwind shells?
The third volley. A
Called
combination of more armor-piercing rockets and promethium-spewing munitions. The former slammed into the legged tanks of the Republic, seeking to mop up those which remained in direct challenge to the Arch Imbalancer, while the latter detonated overhead and rained literal, unquenchable fire upon the army beneath them. Jedi and clones began to scream, began to burn, and then die en masse. Half of them started to attempt a retreat, evidently realizing the trap they had fallen into and the kill zone that was wearing them down.
Yeah, it's only been a few seconds,
but
though.
those
Give them a little
wiser
credit.
warriors would find themselves
Dead.
impaired, even entrapped, as they struggled to cross the flaming ring of molten super heavy tanks which encircled the entire battlefield. And aside from
And that's part of why he probably came out, to draw them in front of the tanks to fight him. Because he can survive the shells around them by just not being hit, because of being able to get the targeting directions on both sides. So they know where he's at and he knows where they're shooting at. And then once the tanks are behind them, they're giant flaming wrecks covered in promethium. So super napalm. He brought them into a kill zone, and it's also a trap made by their own burning wreckages.
that,
Smart.
Sebastian was not done with them yet. Not by a long shot. More gunships flew in, attempting to pull their soldiers out or to strafe the arch-imbalancer as he lifted himself once more. But these Republic vessels were intercepted by vast wings of Thunderhawks and support ships, the very same who would soon be landing all around the Basilica to effect the sorely needed evacuation. Twin-linked heavy bolters, las cannons, and worse were unleashed, ripping through the paltry armor of the Republic air support, downing
They're
even
not meant
more
for
of them
physical
as
munitions
Sebastian
or
resumed his
plasma.
titanic sword dance. It was not long after that when the confused floundering and fighting of the Replicae became an all-out rout. The men either realizing individually or informed through their comms that the battle was a useless one. Even if they killed Sebastian, this would not end. This would not stop. He was but a fearsome lure, with their true enemies being too far behind to actually reach. But that did not hold back the Dreadnought's vengeful blade, chasing down Jedi and clones, ruining them, cleaving
He was
them,
there to destroy
tearing
them.
the witches and their
They are
slaves
destroyed.
asunder. More volleys fell, more tanks exploded, more of the Republic died with each successive whirlwind strike. He allowed them no quarter or escape from the quagmire he had created, bounding between groups of fleeing survivors, expending his storm bolters and blackening the blood of countless false men. 5 minutes after the battle had begun, it was over, and the arch-imbalancer found himself lulling in the fight, no foes remaining alive and near enough to challenge him. Already the Thunderhawks and transport
Looks like
ships
Coleman
were
died off
seeking
screen
to
then.
land all around the Basilica. Space Marines hopping down from them to start clearing landing zones, and Tech Marines of his chapter approaching from several directions to begin examining the damage, which
Wait. Coleman, I think in an earlier section, noted the Red Storm was coming this way, and they just cleared off all the Star Wars side. Does that mean whenever the Demon Storm gets there, it's only going to be fighting the Imperium side? Not where I thought that would go, considering how close they were all.
coated his smoking, glowing carapace.
Oh, Coleman was thrown out? Oh, I
made
thought he
to
came back and
start
died then.
pursuing
I guess he
what
just got thrown out.
survivors he could still detect. The battlefield around him an absolute ruin of fire, craters, and stacked bodies. But before he could take more than 9 steps, he received a new communication, though this time not from his 9th captain.
Oh?
This is Sebastian.
He droned as he accepted the new Newspheric connection.
Who's going?
Honored Elder, Arch-Imbalancer. This is First Captain Heldris Torv,
Oh.
and I bear grave news. A virus bomb has been deployed within the Basilica, the one housed within the Chapel of Salvation.
Okay, so they found out about the virus bomb. When did they find out about the virus bomb? So this had to be a little bit after Grandma decided to dive down to catch it.
It is currently descending to the lower levels of the planet.
Came the report, sounding from within his very skull.
What is the time to detonation?
Was Sebastian's immediate follow-up question.
Under 9 minutes, sir. The soldiers delivering the report claim that the Canoness Superior threw herself after it, and they seem confident that she will stop it somehow.
But
However,
The disembodied voice of the first captain continued to say,
That is not assurance enough. Prepare for immediate evacuation. We will be able to withdraw only the first wave. Have them ready, Captain Heldris. We leave as soon as it is possible, and we shall not be able to return.
So they're immediately pulling out after showing their dominance because they know about it. How many waves did they send? Like, is their entire force already on the ground, or is a significant proportion already above them? I mean, being given a suicide mission as a start is not unusual. No, most of their missions count as suicide missions that they sometimes survive. I wish there was some kind of indication of how much a wave there was out there already. Oh, Ayla Secura. Oh, yeah, she's with what's his name?
This was madness. And with a sinking grimness,
Sorry,
the Jedi
Tarn.
Master realized that she and her comrades were the only thing that stood against it. Yeah. Her Jedi blood burned, thousands of years of war echoing inside of her, telling her but one thing. Here had stood Master Zalo. Here had stood Master Farfalla. Here had stood Master Vodo Siosk Bas. And here now stood Master Ayla Secura, perhaps not facing
where
down
Ayla
a true
dies?
Sith, but something that was in many ways even worse, representing within black, cruel eyes the very heart of darkness. His power bit into the netherworld itself, his metaphorical teeth sharp enough to make the very Force shudder and withdraw. She herself felt a tremor run through her, panting, sweat slicking her densely as she stood over the burning body of Jedi Master Hishro Taij.
One
Black
down.
flames devouring his flesh, biting through his body, forcing howls of rasping pain from his lips.
He's not
his
dead?
eyes looking at her, begging for release, begging for mercy. Yet there was only one mercy Ayla could give him, now that the fire had him, and he knew it too, and begged in agonized, wordless screams for it. His face was aflame, his tongue devoured already, his every breath pulling the dark fires deeper into his body. Ayla felt tears wet her eyes, but her face was hard as she swung down and cut the head off of the Master, his decapitation ending the fires almost instantly. Eyes stinging, she looked up and centered her sight on the diabolical force they were attempting to contend with.
Yeah, fire that burns you alive but won't kill you. This is what I think Palpatine would almost wish he would be able to master himself. On the other hand, it might be too easy, and he would like something a little more dangerous because freaking adrenaline junkie.
The Jedi had been throwing themselves at him, trying to wear Tarweiler down, attacking him with
Yeah, it ain't
force,
gonna work.
saber, and skill in equal measure.
You'd have a
But
better
he
chance against the
danced
Dreadnought.
around them, bent time and space with mere flickers of his thoughts. One moment behind them, the next above. He struck with his bare hands, each blow as weighty as a falling star, his black blade no longer required, if it ever had been at all.
Oh no,
And
definitely
yet,
just for show.
those warriors he slapped to pieces were among the luckiest, their ends coming quickly and with far less pain than that of the others. Every technique, every strategy, every lightsaber form, everything the Jedi could use against him spattered against his unnatural agility and ability to warp reality like rain upon a powered deflector shield.
Probably literal
And
description
even at the
too.
height
Because
of their assault,
when you get that high up,
it was evident that Tarweiler was no more than toying with them.
Oh, yeah.
He struck right and left. Tarsis Khan crying out as he was slapped across the chest, his voice cut short as his force shield buckled, and he was sent spinning, broken into the wall. Weiler kicked right, his foot sinking into the face of Master Jasora Taub like it might have through whipped cream, destroying her mid-strike, his leg following through to stomp onto the ground. Gore spattering from him and leaving him unnaturally clean as his free hand caught the saber and threw it directly at Ayla's chest. She was several meters away at this point, but even then, she barely had the reflexes in her to catch the speeding blade, snatching it out of the air with a spin and grasping it by its handle. The glowing bar of light seared her shoulder, but nothing else, and she harnessed that pain and enacted her retribution. The Jedi Master screamed in rage, her dispassion dispelled, finishing her spin and hurtling the saber back, throwing it like a spinning glaive which sliced the air back in his direction.
The irony being, she's probably one of the better off people to fight because of her style drawing power against enemies with the dark side. It's probably close enough to count here. On the other hand, we saw how that went for Windu, so better, in air quotes, is heavily necessary.
But as with
I think they're all going
much
to
that
die
had already
horribly,
occurred,
unless
it was
plot
for
says
naught.
otherwise.
The Inquisitor rolling his midnight eyes, causing the yellow saber to veer off his path and to the right with a casual ease which could not but invoke despair in her. But the saber was caught again, yanked from the air by Master Quinlan Voss, who spun with it, green blade held in his primary hand as he re-engaged the Inquisitor. Lidless eyes red and fiery with a need for vengeance.
Yeah.
Her former master challenged the tall, monstrous man directly, standing before the fell face of the enemy, several more Jedi coming
plus,
to his
man.
aid.
Still toying with them.
The Inquisitor bobbed and weaved, his form buzzing, blurring, shifting in the air impossibly as the insane Imperial laughed and laughed. He ducked another of Quinlan's twin strikes, and as he came up again, his hands lit ablaze with that horrific black fire.
I am wondering why he's playing around with them, though. Because he seemed very dedicated to his warped and definitely not Chaos Sorcerer-infused plans. I'm going to stick with that one, because at this point, I think he's the only person who doesn't realize that. And Hobbit said because he's just having fun. And you know what? That makes sense. These are people who he probably doesn't need to worry about his plan, and disposing of them probably helps him out further. And since they've already seen his power, he might as well get rid of the evidence. And at this point, why not enjoy it? The only real win they can get is one person escaping to make sure someone else knows about him. And I don't think he's weak enough to do that. So we're literally just getting a giant tour of Tar having fun and maybe revealing he has a little few pokey horns that he keeps having to shave off. I doubt that'll come up, but frankly, at this point, it's eventually going to happen.
An arc of it issuing from his fingers and palms, and colliding with the three Jedi who were upon him. Voss drew in his power, almost puppeting his own body with the Force alone, as he assumed a Vapad stance, and spun his blades, catching the flames and hurtling them around his body with great effort.
And Alpha Plus,
The
you're not
other
fighting a
two
person,
Jedi
you're fighting a
had no
localized
such
reality warper.
countermeasures. The waves of dark flame catching them and burning through them, leaving them screaming and half intact onto the ground. Quinlan stepped over and around them as he continued his contest, speeding his strikes with renewed power. Master Voss was one of the most pragmatic and powerful fighters in the entire Jedi Order.
Really? He is?
Ayla knew to be a fact.
Didn't actually know that.
Yet their enemy made dodging her former master's attacks look trivial, almost effortless, sliding past Voss's green and yellow sabers like oil within water, swimming around a stirring spoon. Voss was reaching speeds and strengths he had never revealed to her before, even wounded as he was. He was doing as she was, she realized, seemingly feeding on his own pain, but it was not enough.
Come now, you must swing faster than that. I am barely moving. Come on, Jedi Knight.
He's probably not even lying. For him, it probably does count.
Dance faster.
The creature called Wyler mocked as he weaved around another combination.
Just going back to the moment where Wyler was still putting on the act of not being super powerful, and Voss could have actually killed him because he was still acting like he could. Because, not being expected to die is a good way to stay dead. I know I'm making no sense that way, but basically, Voss had a chance to kill him. He decided to grandstand. All of this is because Voss did that. That would make it the second time he had a giant plan fall on his face because of a psychic person from the Imperium. He doesn't have a good track record.
Backhanding Voss in the maneuver's crescendo. The black flames in the monster's palms wet out as he performed the strike, reigniting a moment later. The Jedi's head snapped around, but his force shield held strong against the hammering strike, whirling with the force of it to absorb the damage and coming right back at the enemy. The Inquisitor was making it clear that Quinlan was surviving the bout on nothing more than his humor, for all it took was a single lick of the flames to ensure an inescapable doom for any Jedi they touched.
Yep.
All around the two dueling figures were scattered the smoldering, black fire-seared bodies of Ayla's order. Over 100 Jedi at least, while almost 200 more voiced howls and cries of pain, their bodies being consumed by the fires this fell creature had struck them with. The flames appeared to feed on the Force itself, becoming inextinguishable once they caught onto a Force wielder's body, burning until their lives were expended.
Yeah,
But
probably literally
once the
psychic
Jedi
fire
died,
then.
the fires
we
would
knew, but-
falter before vanishing completely. The technique
Eating
was an
souls.
atrocious one, giving Ayla the sense that it was not only the bodies of its victims which were burned and consumed by these obsidian flames, but their very presence in the Force as well. Quinlan bellowed, waves of concussive force blasting from him and driving the other Jedi back, though his opponent didn't feel them or react to them at all as bodies and sabers were sent sprawling in all directions. The contending Jedi was reeking with the dark side, his eyes blazing with increasing hatred. Ayla wished she could try to temper him, to pull him back from the shadowy edge he was skirting. But how could she ask him to die in such a horrific way in place of risking falling to the dark side? No, she turned her mind to something more conducive, rescuing him from this suicidal duel before the Inquisitor tired of his own terrible game.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to succeed on that one. In fact, I think letting him die horribly to a punch or anything other than fire is probably safer. Ugh.
But how? She looked around at the other Jedi nearby, the ones who were not burning, who yet remained to fight. How many of them could she rely on, when so much fear now festered in their eyes? No, she would not allow that to...
I'm going to just say it right now. The Jedi who are absolutely terrified, they're the smart ones. Although, Tar specifically is lying about this one. Can't just call him Wyler anymore considering there's multiple. Ugh. But Tar is definitely lying. He said, let me show you the power of Alpha Plus. Except he's not showing the power of Alpha Plus. He's showing them a smidgen of, I'm just not going to get hit by you and throw a few powers around. If he wanted to show them the power of Alpha Plus, he would do a lot worse. So for them, that's probably a good thing. Until he gets bored.
deter her. Instead, she used it to screen them. Who among them had more serenity or fury than fear? They would be her soldiers, the ones to help her rescue her master. But how? How? The idea struck her like a sudden inspiration.
What?
Jedi, to me, gather! She called out, the others of her order who could still answer coming to her location right away. Ayla scrutinized them, selecting from those who would suit her purposes before sharing her plan.
Choosing the dead?
It was not hard to convince the other Jedi. After all, they had tried everything else already. Plan in place, they broke apart into two teams.
What do they have left that they
either
could try?
running to the opposite sides and invoking the Force. Ayla jumped from the ground and landed at an unnatural angle upon the wall, beginning to run across the side of the makeshift prison, shifting her inertia by her mastery within the metaphysical.
Star Wars Visions? Oh, I
The
haven't seen that
agile
one.
Twi'lek Jedi leapt past the doors and holes which impeded her, as though they were easily avoided pits, gaining speed all the while.
What?
To her left and right, other Jedi followed, blades burning, wounds born of their capture and imprisonment bleeding as they sped after her, eyes full of focus, rage, and the will to avenge themselves. She could feel it all within them without looking at those who followed after her, these sensations now very much a part of her plan. Across from her was another squad of
What
Jedi,
are they trying to pull
all doing
together?
much as she was on the other wall, converging on the black shape before them, the shadowy Inquisitor still engaged and fighting with her master. Out of all the Jedi who rushed to directly confront Tarweiler, Voss had been the only one to survive in prolonged combat. It would have
Survive. Voss is basically the #1 punching bag at this point, who's not allowed to actually die yet. That's probably the only thing I can think of. And I think Ayla might be punching bag #2 as well.
been more impressive. Yet, once more, the Inquisitor slapped the Jedi Master with the back of his other hand, laughing as Quinlan was staggered,
the Jedi stumbling back before rebounding to attack once more. But the Imperial's callous arrogance would prove his ultimate undoing. She and the other Jedi raced to the flanks of the dueling warriors.
I don't think they're
and
going to have the effect they want.
their minds were joined, the flanking knights all falling in and around the Inquisitor, Voss sliding back in response to Ayla's telepathic warning. A warning she knew he would need, for this was no mere pincer attack.
Oh?
The ruthless knights and masters twisted and contorted their bodies as they closed in, thoughts in perfect sync with one another as they all performed mutual states of battle meditation, summoning it forth to whatever degree they could. Knowledge, a Jedi's first and most subtle weapon, wove between them like fine lotus threads, spinning.
I think we know exactly what Van's about to do here, because he's talking about knowledge, knowing what's happening. Except they don't know what's happening because all they have is his boast about Alpha Plus, and that means nothing to them other than it sounds big. For someone who knows anything about the Imperium scaling, that is the equivalent to saying, oh, fuck, get orbital bombardment on this thing. And admittedly, that might not be a good option either. Because again, localized reality warper. The things stronger than this are usually demons at this point, specifically Magnus, and the Emperor, if he wasn't chairbound. Or maybe still, if he is chairbound. It's hard to say how much is magic still and how much is just faith empowering him to do bullshit non-psychery stuff. It's a little weird. So yeah, I'm assuming fans building them up right now because the next stage is Tar no-selling it.
Together to create something far stronger and far more precise. Normally, only 4 or 5, perhaps 6 Jedi, if their size is permitted, could attack a single target with lightsabers at once without getting in each other's way. But now, 27 Jedi shut closed their trap around Tarweiler. Bodies and blades conjoining like puzzle pieces, spinning and lunging into an acrobatic display which formed a near-perfect sphere of bodies around their enemy, all holding sabers, all angled in. The maneuver was perfect,
But
inescapable, and Ayla felt a renewed sense of vicious vigor spill into her as she saw their attacks land home.
And
31 lightsaber blades pierced Tarweiler from every direction, his body suddenly riddled with bars of burning light.
But
His mind had reached out in the last moments, expelling power to repel them. But like a tightly woven net, the conjoined Jedi had pulled upon each other as they attacked and overcame the exhalation of strength the Inquisitor had attempted to shield himself with. His face was still trapped in a grin, but he was not laughing anymore, and the smile was a hollow thing. But then
it was pretty hollow
the
before.
laugh resumed, yet not from the man before her. The man caught between them seemed to waver and then faded from existence, his empty smile vanishing to reveal something which stole Ayla's breath away. She was stabbing into the Jedi across from her. In fact, most of them had impaled each other, skewering their fellow members in a crossfire she had been sure they had been careful to avoid. In panic, the Master Jedi tried to pull away, several others mimicking her, drawing their sabers out of their comrades.
And he's gone full-on mind games, which he could have been playing intentionally the entire time to make him seem like he's teleporting around. But it also means that if they had established battle meditation and it wasn't just an illusion on his end, he's been listening to them and feeding them false sensation around it, and through the Force as well, which is a great deal of control. Very impressive. But also, at what point do you want to believe it's real? The part where he stabbed, the part where they're stabbing each other, or maybe they were stabbing air and then she's being told that everyone's stabbing each other. This is the problem with mind games when you have someone this powerful. All and nothing can be real depending on what the author wants to say. I'm assuming Fan is going with the most fucked up option though, so they stabbed nothing, missed, and started stabbing each other because he was manipulating them.
And sometimes pulling themselves off of the burning blades that they themselves had been struck with. Most collapsed in a pile where their enemies should have been, while others lasted longer, bearing the woundings long enough to step away before falling to their knees.
How come no one just turns their blades off when they want to get off them?
Those spared the touch of a lightsaber numbered only 5, Ayla Sakura among them. She felt her strength collapsing out of her. The air in her lungs stolen as she saw the body of the other Jedi she had impaled, likely onto dying. How did you... She began
Magic.
to gasp,
Sorry,
her
psychic
head
powers.
turning almost limply to follow the incessant laughter. The Inquisitor was smugly leaning on a rail near to the stairs,
Maybe this counts as
eyeing
no
them
selling it.
all with deep amusement, hands wreathed in black flames.
How? Oh dear. Don't you realize it yet?
And the entire
I
time?
knew what you would do because you told me about it.
They did talk out loud.
The Imperial said, his voice
And
thick with superiority.
Psychered out loud?
The Jedi Master had
Forced
no
out loud?
idea what he meant by that until, with a suddenness which threatened to throw her off her feet, she realized that her combat meditation was still linked to the mind of one other Jedi who had not lost their focus. No, not a Jedi at all. Tar Weiler's shark-toothed smile grew wider as he saw the epiphany strike her. The knowledge that he had infiltrated their combat trance from the get-go, slicing into her like a cruel carver's knife. You were never even there, she whispered.
Oh, no. What I did was more than a mere illusion. You fools do not even realize it yet, but I have been in your minds from the start of this pathetic little contest. Your barriers are so weak. I don't even need to break them for me to subvert your very thoughts. I can just slide inside like...
If he wanted to say that no one was here except for her and Voss, it would actually be believable at this point. Although I don't think that he would put on that much effort for that. Granted, who knows? Maybe he is. Maybe he doesn't.
Cracks. You, your master Quinlan Voss, all of your dead and dying Jedi friends.
The Inquisitor gloated as he pushed off the railing and began to stalk forward.
Now, the game has grown tiresome. It is time, I think, to pack you up. Kneel. I'll make this part painless if you do not resist.
Yeah, that's not a good
He
choice.
purred past the dagger-like teeth which filled his grinning mouth.
And Molnar in the chat just commented, Fan just wrote Weiler sliding inside all the Jedi. God damn it, Fan. Why do you write things that can be taken that way?
Quinlan Voss trembled from head to toe, but his face showed no fear as he spat and lifted his blade, sword humming hungrily in the air. You will not take her, or any of us. I do not know why you came, or how you gained this power, but I will stop you, he declared, charging.
You know what
back
you
in,
did, Fan.
Blades spinning in a frenzy of flashing movements.
That's the spirit.
The Inquisitor mocked as he rushed in to meet Quinlan, moving in like a phantom, ducking around and avoiding the blades which
If he's
chased
in the
him.
mind, this is all
Voss
useless.
worked through another 6 strikes, but he could not even scorch Weiler's robe. Another strike, then an 8th, before Tar halted the 9th. The green blade
just
swinging
catch
down
it?
to chop into his shoulder and through his torso, paused by an upraised, clawed hand. The space around it warped and distorted with purple and black coloration.
Still so slow. Still so weak.
The Inquisitor snarled as Voss pushed down with all his might.
Are you really this pathetic? Or do you simply not want it enough?
Tar Weiler scolded, pulsing the power in his hand and sending Voss skidding
He's
back.
definitely
a few
playing
feet.
with them.
Let me reveal to you then some of the reason behind the madness you think you are fighting.
Is he really going into a villain monologue? You know what? This guy's already a stereotypical villain in many ways. He's just competent on top of it. But okay, sure, we're getting a villain monologue. And the question is, does anyone survive? Does Ayla survive to get this information out? I'm assuming Voss ain't, but just because I don't think Fan's been favoring him much. Admittedly, the actions Fan has used him for have been incredibly backfired. So yeah, Villain monologue it is.
The Inquisitor gloated, following after the Jedi he had pushed away, hands blazing black, whips of unnatural fire curling out from him and slapping across the ground. He raised his arms, lashing at Quinlan, who was forced once more to fall into painful vapad just to stand a chance.
I guess he doesn't take him seriously. He can indulge in the stupid.
Rolling back from the strokes as the tongues of flames twisted around his blades, nearly licking him across the face and chest. Both sabers now held within these coils of unreal, void-like power. He was pulled taut and reeled in, closer and closer despite his resistance, attempting to keep his distance.
There will be no victory here on this foul little planet. Every Imperial soldier will die. Every space marine sent down to its wretched surface will die. Every hero under the Empire who remains will die,
said the insane man.
No, at least I can understand that part. He is definitely insane. Especially since this is why I'm fighting you, because I'm going to make sure you win. His plan, it makes sense if you just need a calling card to keep everyone together. I'm wondering if his real target for him is keeping them together despite the Admiral, or is he using the Admiral as a... Not the Admiral, the guy who's been mentioned the beginning half of this episode and once other time, who's playing politics to get his own little fiefdom. Like, just that splintering is what he's fighting against. Or what he thinks he's fighting against. What he's actually doing is playing into Chaos's hands because he's that kind of idiot, which is what happens to a lot of Inquisitors, actually, so it's not a unique fate.
Pulling Voss closer and closer. The Jedi grit his teeth at the words, an eternal glare dark over his every feature.
The War Master.
That cannot be true. You are an Imperial. Why would you do that to your own people?
Like he cares?
The Jedi growled as he was brought almost right into the Inquisitor's face, his arms pulled out to either side.
Fool! Can you really not fathom the reason?
No, he probably can't.
Tarweiler mocked.
We are the Imperium of Man. We do not lack for soldiers, space marines, or heroes. They...
Normally, I would say he's just bullshitting because he would understand the situation. But he's let down enough of his let's go with hair on this one because it fits the metaphor, if not the, well, you know. I would assume the not lacking for resources is him just saying, we got plenty. But that's not the case right now. They actually explicitly do not have plenty. The civilian ship was destroyed early on. They don't have a way home to restock. They don't have ways to create more, well, probably don't have any gene forges. Or, well, Fan could say they have a gene vault on the ships because it was a space-based chapter, I think. But other than that, this is not an easily restockable thing. Yeah, sure, they can raffle stomp a lot of people, but every single loss is almost completely irreplaceable right now. That is... Did he actually not internalize that? Normally, I think he's just bullshitting it here, but... If he actually hasn't internalized that, then everything he's doing is working on a premise that is completely bullshit.
We are created and spent every day. All for the greater victory.
Yeah,
when
standard.
The others hear about what occurred, when they see those blood-red names listed as the Fallen, they will blame the Republic. Those who seek isolation and peace will be silenced, forced to capitulate to a greater conflict.
There were people who wanted peace? Don't get me wrong, I don't think Crimson Razors would do it. The Tempered Hands would never do it because they're very much the, we're going to do this because fuck it. I might think they're the nicest chapter. Doesn't mean I think they're the peaceful one. And sorry, I was about to say the wrong name. Team Blue, I think they would gladly take over. I don't think that plan stops if there's enemies they want to kill or not. I don't think that would really change anything at all. So does he know someone else who would actually go for the peace option? Because I don't think there's any side that we've been experienced with yet who would view peace as an option. And maybe I'm just missing an entire contingent here. Now, we know that that might be an option with some of the tech priests who are breaking off, but that's a recent development, not something Tar could have planned around. And no one else has had enough control within their little brigade to do so. It was hinted at that they're fractured, but it hasn't been displayed. It's only been hinted at fracturing so far.
A conflict which shall deliver unto us this entire galaxy and the strength we need for true unity.
Yeah,
And
that's stupid.
besides, the loss to us will be painful, but insubstantial. Can you say the same?
For Jedi, no. For clones, maybe. For people, actually, yeah, they pretty much easily could. I know Fan inflated the numbers of a lot of the Star Wars side here because when you look at it on a sheer number basis, it's actually kind of ridiculously low, but they're giant sci-fi fantasy numbers. They don't have any meaning to start with. They're just there to sound good for people who buy books. And that's really what it's about. But yeah, he's actually working on the premise that they have replaceable losses, which is interesting because this isn't just a fan issue. I think it has to be something he's intentionally thinking about in Tar's side, because when he went back to the Admiral's perspective, she acknowledged, yeah, we can win, but we'll take losses, and we don't have a way to replace those yet. They're not in a position of having the Imperium's logistics behind them. And while that is usually said as a joke, in this reality, it is very much an actual thing they need to consider. They have a fleet, not an entire empire behind them. And it's not like they're taking ground. They took Tatooine. I mean, it's like a slightly nicer version of Mars, but without all the things that made Mars valuable. Oh, and Fan said in the chat that he's basically referring to the Jedi. Yeah, but also the Jedi have been kind of shown not to be a massive threat. If anything, they're not the frontline combatants that they were being treated as through most of the Clone Wars in this situation, with very few exceptions. They're just kind of getting red-shirted en masse in this one.
He hissed, his breath the scent of burning corpses rolling over Quinlan's bloody face.
What are you talking about?
The Jedi Master grunted and groaned, trying to pull in his arms, trying to get his sabers free of the flames which held him spread.
Do you really think I do not intend to take my toll from your republic as well? You
Palpatine might have a thing about that.
All of you. You have gathered all of your psycho witches into one place. All of your heroes. All of your best. We will bleed from the loss, but you will die from...
I just realized Palpatine accidentally made a good tactical decision by setting up things at this point for Order 66. So he accidentally gets exactly what he wants, but the Jedi are now the dead heroes who fought and died horribly. I mean, he's not going to play... Just... If canon Star Wars wasn't about to happen and the Republic was going to rely on the Jedi for the future, this would be a horrible loss. As it stands, it's like, oh, well, I wasn't the one to pull the button on the Jedi. I'm personally disappointed about this. Moving on. That just, if anything, they sped up his plan to get rid of the Jedi slightly. And, I mean, really the biggest loss here to Palpatine, who is essentially in control of the Republic, is that he's not the one doing it. And admittedly, for his planning, that might actually be a deal breaker as far as he's concerned.
Your republic will leave this battle with nothing. No Jedi, no replicae, none save those who could not be fielded.
I mean, as far as Palpatine's concerned, that might actually be the win.
Death in the same blow that I stir my Imperium into righteous war. The galaxy will burn. The Republic's body will be the kindling.
You know, all the times I say he's basically a psyker. When you have him explicitly quote Abaddon, let the galaxy burn. I mean, dear God, Fan. I'm just going to keep calling him a freaking closeted chaos sorcerer at this point because he's very much at it already. Yeah, my Imperium. Yeah, I don't give him much credence with that one. I have a feeling blue team might have some options. Just throwing it out there.
The Jedi, the first to scream in the flames.
The towering, dark Imperial crooned and raved.
With the same blow that will begin this war in earnest, I shall end it as well. A downward slope from which your weak government shall never recover. You and your dear blue pet and all.
And talking about their government, calling them out as weak, not realizing that, yeah, they are incredibly weak and corrupt because of Palpatine fucking with it. And the previous Jedi who either, depending on which canon you're going with, ignored the fact that they were being led by corrupt assholes, or the Sith who were intentionally corrupting it and hiding it long term to get to that position. Or in the canon, or new canon from Disney, where it was actually one possessed Sith in a series of possessed Sith. That's why you only had two. You had the current host and the future host. Admittedly, it's actually way more creepy that way, but still, it just... Yeah, it's like, oh no, I have to destroy the Republic to survive and reform it as a way I prefer. Oh no. He's unintentionally doing Palpatine's work for him.
All those who survive my games here shall be the last of the Jedi. Your order will scream here, but it will die in the darkness of my cells, my labs, and my prison.
Also like canon, for ones who didn't die.
Make you my own, and those who will not change, I shall discard as mere research material.
Also what happened in canon
Now,
Star Wars.
Realization of the true madness they faced struck the Jedi who remained, Voss and Ayla most of all.
You're completely insane!
Oh, yeah.
Quinlan spat.
I mean, he is an
The
Inquisitor.
Inquisitor began to laugh again.
Sanity's overrated.
My insanity, as you call it, shall rule this universe.
Yeah.
So I ask you again, Jedi Knight of the Feeble Republic, is this all you have? Is this the extent of the witch generals, so vaunted, so feared, so disappointing? You have only one chance. Defeat me here, or watch your entire world, your whole universe, cease to exist.
And there's his taunt to make sure that his plans never get out. You must defeat me! Inspiring them to do their best to do it, even though they have literally no choice. If someone isn't accidentally removed at this point, I think they're just all going to run to their death.
Tarweiler prodded and hissed.
If those are my only choices, then I will defeat you!
Voss roared before snapping his head forward, headbutting Tarweiler on the bridge of his nose.
Oh!
It was like
expecting
slamming
that.
his head into a steel wedge.
But
the Inquisitor recoiled, stunning him long enough for Voss to release his apprehended yellow lightsaber.
can we all just acknowledge the irony of a guy who has all the psychic power being thrown off his game by physical attacks? Without the lightsaber, without the psychic powers, just fuck you, I'm a put shit. There's an immediate irony in this, and I love it. It's like if a super crazy strong Sith was defeated by being thrown down a hole.
Grasping his green blade in both hands and spinning into the sudden slack of the flame whip which held it, seeking to cleave the man in half with a strike. Tarweiler bent backwards in a way a body should not have been able to, the burning blade passing over him as he slid beneath. He came back around, the flame whip pulling the yellow lightsaber into his hand and using it to block the next strike Quinlan followed up with. Sparks flying as the bars of light struck each other and locked, both faces near behind them.
Better, Jedi! Better!
Is he training Voss to be his toy?
The Inquisitor admonished before releasing a growl of his own, pushing Quinlan away with a thrust of his own kidnapped blade.
He got a little
The two
surprised,
beginning a mortal exchange,
and he's having fun with it
darkness
now.
Writhing in their shadows as their sabers collided again and again. Ayla wished she had that kind of strength, but alas, there was no hope left in her now.
Getting people
What
out is a
ploy
good
could she
choice.
devise? What plan? What power? What tactic could she resort to
when
Run.
he could access her thoughts so easily and bend reality so readily. She was reminded of her first battle with General Grievous and of her own fall to the dark side. She was reminded of how easily he had defeated her earlier that same day, so many hours ago.
Fuck yeah, it's still a single day. God, yeah, a single day. It's been mentioned before, but every time I hear it, it kind of just slaps me in the face with the fact that this has been such a short time period.
And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, she felt her faith in the Order shaken to its very core. Were they wrong? Was the Jedi Order wrong all of this time?
Yes,
Had
but not for what you're
really
thinking about.
fallen to such depths of weakness that they could do nothing against these monsters that continue to assail them?
I mean, yes, not for the reason you're thinking. Right now, it's because he's really kicking your ass. But before, it's all the monsters you completely ignored until it was too late.
How was it possible that after all of this time, after all of her sacrifices, all of her trials, she was still so far behind? The face of Kit Fisto flashed through her mind. His bright smile, his comforting presence, his love. She and he had forsaken it, discarded those precious seeds of attachment to dedicate themselves further to the Jedi Order. The same order that had led them here. Into this war, into this fight she could not win. How could Master Yoda have claimed what he claimed? Told her that the light could always vanquish darkness.
I'm pretty sure Fan is going with the newer interpretation of Yoda where he foresaw the fall of the Order and accepted it. And the only time he tried to fight against it was literally in his final fight against Palpatine. And when he lost, he was like, okay, I tried, moving on. And just exiled himself. I mean, she's not wrong, though. Yoda literally did just give up.
As her mentor, her friend, her brother, fought with all he had, only to be slowly pushed back and crushed down. Voss and Wyler clashed repeatedly, again and again. Blades of gold and green bleeding sparks with each touch, their speeds accelerating, and yet the distance between them never seeming to shrink for more than an instant. Moment by moment, Quinlan was growing stronger, but somehow, paradoxically, still losing ground. Every
Guess
time
he's
he
still
seemed
being
to gain an
played
advantage, reality would warp, and the
Small
Inquisitor would
surprise,
escape and
but
counter
not
with
actually
even
the power
more
of Peter.
ferocity. With startling clarity, Ayla realized that she was going to watch him die.
Yep.
Or that he would watch her die. Or that they would both watch each other be dissected and pulled apart by this monster if he chose to take them alive. For he was the only one with any choice here, and she, as well as the defeated Jedi around her, dead or alive, were not able to impede his will beyond what he humored. Something deep within Ayla was crushed in that moment, and she knew it, and did not know if she would ever be able to heal it, or if she ever would desire to. Finally, the bout between the two furious Force wielders was ended. Tarweiler kicking Voss in the chest, and as the Jedi's arms flew out to either side, the Inquisitor swept down his stolen saber and cleaved through the wrist of his right hand.
Here goes the blade.
The Jedi cried out in pain before suddenly being lifted from the ground before he could fall, held within a tight, invisible grip. Tar lifted his own free hand, discarding the yellow saber with the other, his left hand curled and raising the constrained Jedi, being brought higher and higher into the air as he did. The crackle and pop of joints and bones being strained to their limit could be heard.
Fan, I have a few questions about your choice of image in conjunction with a Jedi being tortured to death. It seems like they're giving different impressions here, and I don't think tonally this is fitting. Unless I'm missing something and he's getting off on this. Sure.
Voss's arms spread to either side, his body pulled taut in every direction.
This is the end now. I have a ship to catch after all, and I still need to pack you all up. So let's see if we can't make you carry-sized.
Cutting
The
off the
cruel
limbs.
creature crooned as he stepped forward, the fingers of his left hand closing a bit more, forcing a dire scream from Voss as he was stretched even more. "Let him go!" Ayla cried out, dropping her saber from her hand and opening her palms, issuing forth a thoughtless, emotional rush of power towards the two and throwing them both back. Tarweiler collided with one wall, while Quinlan Voss struck the other, the latter
He was
falling
probably
unconscious
disregarding her
and
because she didn't
sliding
think about it.
down, slumping there, while the former merely hissed and grunted as he was pinned against the steel at his back.
And that's 3 times now that we've seen Weiler get beaten up, not because someone was able to overpower him, but because they surprised him. Admittedly, that's why most Alpha Plus Psychers are able to be killed, because someone they weren't expecting fucked them over. Because if they have the power to see it coming, they're not an Omega level Psyker, because that wouldn't matter at that point. But I mean, short of that, you're just the Emperor, or you're an insane monstrosity who's probably already consumed by a demon when you open up a hole by accident. So once when Ayla didn't think about it and just reacted out of sheer fuck it. Once when Voss headbutted him when he wasn't expecting it. And the other time was also Voss when he surprised him by coming in and nearly killing him but holding back. When Weiler was still acting like he wasn't superpowered. Or, well, Alpha Plus. Yeah.
Ayla held her arms
You
out,
see how he's going to
eyes
get his
blazing,
butt.
tears
Not there yet.
streaming down her face as she stepped closer and closer, with more and more force every second that passed. "You will take no one! You will take nothing! No more!" She spat at him, the tall,
I don't think so.
lanky body of the Inquisitor pressed flat against the makeshift prison's boundary like an insect pinned inside of a display case. He tilted his head back down to glare at her, eyes pitch black and glossy, sharpened teeth grit in a frustrated grimace. His right hand began to pry off from the wall, and then his left, before Ayla released a pained shout and shoved him back against the steel. "I said no more! I will stop you! I have to stop you!" she exclaimed, veins defined against her blue skin as she exerted herself like never before. Yet her surge of strength was only able to hold him down for so long, as she felt his own power rising to meet her like a boiling pot held
You get
under
that
pressure,
first hit or it doesn't
swelling
count.
his own repulsive strength under the press of her power, gradually prying himself off from the wall and landing on his feet again, his hand.
I have an unfortunate feeling Ayla's going to survive this, and for anyone who's a fan of her character, we're going to wish she didn't. Because I don't think this is going to be fun. We already got the aborted her being taken by Weiler from her first encounter. I'm not sure we're going to get that the second time.
Hands out and now pushing against her own. Ayla squinted her eyes as she tried to force him back, but the Inquisitor held his ground, robes billowing and tossing.
Impressive, Xenos.
The Imperial
The fact that
said
he has to
through his
struggle
grit
against
teeth.
it all.
But not impressive enough.
And there's him not
He
holding back for a
roared,
second.
opening his palms fully and thrusting his hands out wide. In response, his power exploded outward, and Ayla found herself thrown back, falling and rolling head over heels, regaining her stability as she kneeled against the maelstrom of his power. Blood streamed from her nose, senses entirely overwhelmed.
Yep.
The Inquisitor straightened, smoothing his robes with his hand, a slight glisten of sweat sheening his smooth bald face and head. He then looked up at her and smiled his demon smile.
A valiant effort. Let
But
us
not
see
enough.
if we cannot replicate that in a lab setting.
He began to say, before pausing, his expression melting into one of annoyance as he turned around to face away from her.
What?
Ayla did not hear it at first, nor could she sense it, but soon the sound became loud enough for her to make it out. A steady, frantic clinking and clanking noise coming from up the stairs. The Inquisitor paused his
Droids?
approach And
No.
he, as well as Ayla and the rest who remained conscious, turned their eyes upwards towards the bulky, shambling form of the tech priest known as Omni Kraden.
Oh, his
What
backup.
is it?
Demanded
Yeah, the
Tarweiler,
lackey, or I guess
voice
acolyte.
tinged with irritability.
We are
Surrounded.
What?
Droned the odd Magos.
By who?
The replicate are all around the area. Flying vessels have encircled us.
Ayla's
Tech
forces.
priest reported.
But that wouldn't be a
They
problem,
are
would it?
no matter. I will flay their minds and the very skin from their bodies as soon as I am finished here.
Pronounced the Inquisitor. But the Magos was shaking his head before the man had even finished.
Commissar Shadrick has reported.
That he is nearing completion.
Of the activation of the bomb at the Basilica of...
Salvation.
And more.
Okay, fan, seriously, you're having a lot of fun with this guy's voice. It's just going in all the different possible tonal changes on this. Because, goddamn! And of course, the part that actually gets him to leave, most likely, is a lack of time because the order he gave was actually followed quickly.
Immediately, alarmingly, the Republic escorted something here.
An invader of some sort.
Invader?
It's already inside the building.
The countermeasures I installed.
Cannot even slow it down.
Invader?
Inquisitor.
We need to use the...
I thought the invader the Republic escorted was Ayla, but unless this is a much more incompetent tech priest than I'm assuming, that can't be that. What else do they have that could do that?
The machine man continued before suddenly losing his breath, or what he used in place of it, and rising up from the ground, metal legs kicking and scraping.
Kraden! Kraden, what is happening to you?
The Inquisitor shouted, stepping back and away from the now floating machine man, his black eyes slowly widening as his senses came awake to what his own power had been hiding from him. Slipping from the shadow of Tarweiler's arrogance, stepping down the stairs, one leisurely placed foot at a time, was another figure. Not as tall, and not as overtly monstrous as the Inquisitor, but black-robed and cloaked in a power which radiated out. Ayla saw her own breath fog in the air, suddenly cold in the presence of this new darkness. And as she watched the new figure descend, she knew without having to ask what it was. Omni Kraden choked and wheezed in mechanical fashion, struggling in the invisible grip that held him, clutching at the metallic piping that made up his throat. The robed figure held its hand out in a casual gesture, as though pinching a flea between its thin fingers. Before
Who else
just
is
as
active right now that
casually
could have this power?
rolling its wrist, throwing the Magos into the wall with enough force to break panels loose. Tar watched it all with grit teeth, his brow creasing as all humor left him.
That!
The Inquisitor hissed, his black rapier skidding from the ground and spinning into his hand.
Was a mistake. That tech priest belonged to me and my war
Who
master.
can they possibly be doing this
Pronounced
to?
Tarweiler, but this new figure in black only chuckled within the dark confines of his hood and shook his head.
Oh no, my ambitious rival.
Purred the voice of an elderly man.
You will find that it is you who are mistaken.
Fan, did you actually drop in Palpatine? I mean, I can't imagine any other reason you would say an old man, slight of frame, who didn't look monstrous, and he used Palpatine's freaking theme for it. Sure, why not? You know, I was going to say it's stupid to send the leader, or the Chancellor, still not the Emperor yet, of the Republic to an entire battlefield, but then I realized, wait, no, this is Palpatine. This is explicitly something he would do, and also he did in Clone Wars canon, because even if I haven't finished it, I know about the stuff that happened where he decided, hey, Darth Maul's alive. Let's go do something about that and have fun. It's half the reason I believe he's a freaking battle junkie. Or
He
adrenaline
continued,
junkie.
a pair of gold-plated handles sliding into either hand, shooting out from his long robe sleeves and into his waiting
Also,
palms.
yeah, Ayla's definitely dead now.
About a great many things.
Pronounced the Dark Lord of the Sith. The handles ignited,
extending out two glowing crimson blades of light. And darkness met darkness, ending Ayla's desperate fight.
Eh? It sounds like Palpatine just killed Ayla. Or knocked her out. Oh, and we're going down to Granny, who's currently falling.
The wind was a lash against her aching skin, buffeting her and tossing her vestments and bandages about wildly. She kept her profile small, as slim as possible, and below she could see the shadowy shape of the virus bomb, falling more slowly than herself, yet still speeding for the ground. The borehole both Imperial weapons fell down through had been drilled past countless existing layers, some of them dark, some of them burgeoning with light. Those bands of light strafed them both, at times blinding Ishtara by their rapid arrival and passing. In one hand, she clutched her flamer pistol between broken fingers. Her other hand extended out, reaching for the tail of the world-ending bomb. Her daughters, Saint Lazarus, her sisterhood, and all of those who depended upon them were constant thoughts in her mind, battling the agony of her ancient body. Suffering was her prayer, and her prayers were now stronger than ever. Fingers grasping the air, scraping the metal of the bomb for several seconds before she attained a grip.
She actually managed to catch
herself closer. There were handholds, railings made to help scale and maintenance the weapon.
The reason I'm actually a little surprised about that is because fans describe something that you basically just got to chalk up to the God Emperor did it. And admittedly, for her, that perfectly makes sense. If they've been falling as long as he seems to be describing them as, essentially more than 20 seconds, both the bomb and her would have hit terminal velocity and be falling at the same speed. Once you kind of do that, your speed is locked in because you can only fall so fast. Outside of what people say, it's kind of how that works. Granted, she's praying, so she caught it. And honestly, that right there is enough to lampshade it, so it makes perfect sense. And fans not highlighting it, but I almost wish he had more, because it's one of those times where you can highlight the explicit nature of it. But maybe it works better the other way. I like more explicit displays when it comes to the God Emperor in 40K, so I'm personal on that one. But I could see someone going the other way. But it works, and how he's describing it, that normally you're falling at this speed, it's falling at this speed, you've been going long enough, it's never going to reach. So bomb here, you're there, or well, reverse that. Never going to meet. Extra magic special prayer force gives you extra speed falling. It sounds stupid when I describe it that way, but it actually legitimately works.
Which she now made use of, hooking bruised toes over them once she had dragged herself one-handed up one side of the tool of Exterminatus.
I like the music
choice.
She
needed to reach the canisters and burn them out, carefully, one at a time, to even have a chance of stopping this. But her going was slow, if frantic. The bomb's descent was also less than controlled, scraping and bumping occasionally against the sides of the tunnel they fell down, each contact risking the fracturing of the viral vials that held the virus. If even one shattered before she could neutralize it, then her whole basilica was dead, if
like
nothing else.
Pray to it, or
but she kept the faith,
she have something else going,
as she always had, and continued to climb. Darkness and light moved past her in rapid succession, pain bleeding into every inch of her. Her movements, such a struggle that she began to lose track of time, lose track of even her own body. Ishtara was dizzy, sick with weakness, and yet still she crawled, using her free elbow to leverage herself, single hand grasping further and further. She clung to the weapon, crying out in pain as it skidded against the wall again, rattling her bones, breaking a few.
Ooh.
But where her mind and body sought to surrender, her spirit refused to bow.
I will never submit, not even in the face of death.
She gasped, reminding the other two weaker parts of herself that failure was not an option. Retreat was not possible.
Considering how many times she should have died already.
Suddenly,
yeah,
there was no more railing.
But
she opened reddened, teary eyes, weeping the wind from her sockets as the venerable mistress of the brides of the Emperor found herself at the lip
to the opening in the bomb, the bright green canisters before her swirling their nefarious contents, not a single one broken yet. She hauled her weapon-bearing arm over and onto the seam.
Wait, she actually planning just to light him on fire?
Ready to
That can't
fire
possibly
even
work.
now within this
I mean,
hurricane
well,
of
God
falling
Emperor backfire,
wind.
sure.
Now was the time. She would not allow the faith to fall. She would not allow so many faithful to die. Or so she thought.
What?
Before the bomb scraped the side of the wall again, this time much closer to her. She screamed, Ishtara's lungs emptying themselves in raw agony as the bomb bumped the side of the tunnel again and pinched off her weapon-bearing arm, crushing half her body with it.
Oh, God. Okay, that surprised me so much I actually started choking. Almost swallowed my tongue on that one. So, yeah. Dropping a freaking ship didn't do it, but falling down a pit did. I mean, honestly, in context, she had a lot of advantages with the battle suit she was in, but still, the arm and the body's crushed. I mean, if you want to tell her she was already going to die, I mean, you already succeeded considering every other section of her is, she's going to die, she's already dead, we can't save her. Oh, she's alive. And then just explicitly saying, yeah, no, she's doing it based on, fuck you, I'm a badass energy. Also the God Emperor, but mostly being a badass. And dear God, man.
The flamer flew away into the tunnel.
Did you watch Saving Private
along
Ryan
with
before
the limb
writing this thing?
holding it. And Ishtara only stayed in place because of her other arm and the leg on the same side, still hooked and anchored around the railing beneath her. The Canoness Superior tried to breathe, but blood slicked her lips, whipped away quickly by the wind, and streaking her face with red. One of her lungs was entirely smashed and punctured, and the other could barely draw any breath at all. The world began to fade, the chill wind around her whistling, carrying away the last bits of heat that composed her life. Was this possible? She wondered as darkness encroached from all sides. Had she finally failed in this, her final task? With a deep and painful resignation, she was forced to admit that she had. Her body could take her no further. Her weapons were no longer with her. Her spirit was bleeding out of her, even now, and the floor was rushing up to meet the bomb and end the world. She had failed entirely, and so she did the only thing that she could do now.
Right.
She put it all into the Emperor's hands. Her final task, unable to be completed by herself in any true capacity. And with the last breaths in her body.
The irony that she's thinking this is a failure when someone who is literally the bride of the Emperor, she, like, talking about all the titles, giving up control to the God Emperor at the very end sounds like the absolute most perfect possible option for a final task.
Ishtara ordered.
I would actually judge Fan worse if she didn't do this.
Oh, Emperor, I pray, hear me now, your loyal servant, in this, my final hour. All of my life I have sought to serve you, to carry out your will. Now I ask, if I truly have earned your favor for one last blessing. The Canoness gasped, her words caught by the wind, but heard nonetheless. Since the moment I understood your glory, I have wanted nothing more than to be a blade, a sword wielded by your almighty hand. I would have been happy to have been born as a divine storm, or a holy bolter, a mighty conflagration, or even a terrible hurricane, a sanctified force of nature without a heart or pity, able to perform your will and nothing more. She called out, blood thick upon her lips, yet not in.
The irony being that's exactly the opposite of what the Emperor wanted during the heresy, or prior to the heresy. I am still wondering how much of him is left in there, and how much is the God Emperor okay with everything she just said. I don't think we'll get to Fan going into that level of detail on the Emperor, but it's probably as close as we're going to get right now.
Intruding upon her final request.
Her eyes blazed with gold. Her struggling heart ceased to pump, and yet still her blood flowed. The shadow of a mighty hand fell over her soul, closing around it like the handle of a weapon, and squeezing tightly, holding it in place. Fire bled from her nostrils, blackening her blood and skin. Flames wept from her eyes, scorching her face. But suffering was her prayer, and all of it was expressed through her words. So I pray, in this final moment, make of me a storm of fire. Make of me an instrument of your purest will. Turn my faith to wrath. Turn my wrath to service. And make my service true. If it is your will that we all die here, then let me be the first. If it is your will that we survive, then take my life and spare the others. So plead I, Ishtara ordain, first among your brides in waiting. Her clothes caught fire, the torn stump of her arm now seeming to leak promethium in place of blood.
She wanted to be a fire.
Her tongue became a tongue of flame, her words echoing with a strength that was not her own. Her remaining hand began to melt into the surface of the bomb.
God
the
damn!
vials cracking in the growing heat. So pray I, servant of the throne, in the Emperor's name. And with those final words, a great blaze began, consuming Ishtara's mortal flesh and expanding out. The virus bomb struck the ground, its lethal payload released, but as soon as it tasted freedom, it was also consumed in fire. The blaze spread like a living explosion, consuming every molecule of the Death Eater virus and far, far more.
Oh, so Fan was going on as a biological Death Eater virus and not the more, it's actually technology, which is what a few other authors have used. Okay, good to know.
By faith and by fury, the Emperor's hand descended over Axum, and with a single golden thumb of fire, smothered the death of the world like a man might crush an ant. So ended the mortal life of Ishtara Ordain.
What?
Queen of warriors. The mortal life of Ishtara Ordain.
Fan? Did you just Saint Gax us on this one? Saying the life would be, okay, she's done as a character retired. Now I'm wondering, what did you just do? You wouldn't pull off another person going Force Ghost, would you? But this isn't a Psyker either, so I don't think you could. Either way, the character is dead, but how long do they stay dead to others?
Queen of warriors, servant
Wonder if
of
we get
the
her back
golden
later.
throne, and bride of the Emperor.
Do we get an actual Saint Ordain on this one?
This is to end in fire.
We had a living Saint die. Now do we get Celestine-ized version? God damn, Fan. God damn. Also, Matthew, no, there's no way in hell I'm listening to the song. I already have enough issues with copyright. I'm not dealing with that. I will listen on my own, though, because I want to hear this! You built up Wyler. You dropped in Palpatine. You guarantee that every single Jedi there is completely dead. The irony of Wyler playing into Palpatine's plan so thoroughly without realizing it that I think it's actually hilarious. And if the next section isn't them fighting and Palpatine hearing the gloating or bringing it up and just like, oh, this is funny, I will laugh my ass off because it's so fitting. You wanted to break the galaxy to take it over, destroy the current system of government, and put yourself in charge. Couldn't have done it better myself. Oh, wait, I did. I can't do a Palpatine voice to save my life. I just default to Wyler. Oh. God damn, man. And then everything about Ordain at the end and Ishtara, one, badass. Two, the fact that she has been built up as this big spiritual head of the order. And her final act is actually to just give herself over completely and to let the Emperor work through her. It's like, it fits perfectly from a standpoint of this is what the character does. So losing the weapons and saying it's a failure, it's like, no, you're just doing what you are literally the best at. It's perfect. Obviously, dead. Mortal life over. The fact that this fan specifically used mortal, I could see him using mortal life as just being poetic because she's dead, highlighting that she's dead. But I could also see him leaving it open for, and now we have the Saint Ordain, or the Saint Ishtara, who has come back in your time of need, because, that's literally what a lot of saints did. The non-living ones, Celestine. And a few others who honestly don't get nearly as much play in 40K lore now that I think about it. There's actually a number of them that have been around and are well documented, and it's not like they're hidden in lore. They're just never used outside of Celestine. Huh. It's weird now that I think about it. I want to see what happens next, and goddamn am I excited. Also because just seeing Palpatine, but just seeing where this goes next, seeing what happens, seeing the fallout of this, and trying to figure out what the hell you're going to do once this first 24-hour period of this massive battle ends and you can actually do time skips again. Oh. I want to see it, man, and I can't wait. Unfortunately, though, I literally have to because I promised my wife I'd be done at 3, and it's almost 3, so for once I'm not late. And I'm going to pretend I said 3 and not 2 o'clock, so yeah, that's on me. And in the comments, Ishtara the Grey has become Ishtara the White. Falling through fire. Yeah, she fell through fire and flame. That actually perfectly fits. Huh. Either way, you guys know the deal. Link below video. Hit it up. Go support Fan. Hit up his Patreon. And if anyone knows if he has a physical book or his comic in a hardbound setting, let me know. Personal bias against anything soft covered, I just don't. They break too easily. And by break too easily, I mean I accidentally destroy them too easily. So yeah, go support Fan. He's awesome. And Van, obviously, thanks for writing this. It's really good. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios. Also, there's a specific one I should watch. Let me know. I got a few comments about Thrawn doing the Nature of the Imperium. I don't know if that's in the playlist or not. So I'll have to find out. I'll see you guys then. Later.